subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Synopsis. Reborn is fairy tale, Erza's childhood friend. Activate to obtain the pirate template system. One of the awakened four emperors' big MOM template. Gains strength and tenacity at the beginning of the game. On the night when the dark magic order came, Luo Zhen slapped the Black Mage to death with one hand. Gradually build your own country. Chapter 1. Erza is my childhood sweetheart. Pirate system. Where am I? In a dilapidated small room, a pale young man looked blankly at his skinny hands. Raising his eyes and looking around, the strange environment made the teenager a little scared. This strange body also made the boy a little unresponsive for a while. The boy's gray-brown pupils were full of confusion, and the last memory in his mind was a sharp pain and a hideous face. The boy's name is Luo Zhen. In his previous life, he acted bravely and saved a little girl. Afterwards, he was stabbed to death by a trafficker, and what he saw at the last moment of his life was the ferocious face of the trafficker. With the complete disappearance of Luo Zhen's consciousness, when he opened his eyes, he saw this strange, dilapidated hut in front of him. At this time, Luo Zhen was about to get up and go out to see where it was. A memory suddenly flooded into Luo Zhen's mind. Accompanied by a tingling pain, Luo Zhen's complexion became even paler. Cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. Luo Zhen gritted his teeth. His complexion became extremely ferocious. After the intense, stinging pain disappeared, Luo Zhen sat on the ground with difficulty, panting heavily. Leaning limply on the side of the bed, an inexplicable brilliance shone in his eyes. After a while, Luo Zhen murmured to himself, "I didn't expect to cross over the kingdom of Fiori, the world of magic." In that memory, I learned that the owner of my body is named Luo Zhen, who lives in a remote mountain village in the kingdom of Fiori. Because his parents passed away, he was the only child left. A few days ago, due to illness, he finally failed to survive and passed away last night. Afterwards, Luo Zhen, who was reborn, was resurrected with the help of his dead body. The orphan at the beginning is really the lone star of the devil. Luo Zhen couldn't exert any strength due to his weak body, grinning and muttering to himself with a bitter smile on his face. In the previous life, Luo Zhen grew up in an orphanage and never met his parents since he was a child. I didn't expect to live a new life, and I was still an orphan in this life. But the name Fiori Kingdom sounds familiar. Looking at the blue sky outside through the dilapidated roof, Luo Zhen didn't know where he heard the name for a while. "Luo Zhen, are you home?" At this time, a childish voice suddenly came from outside the door, and a doubt flashed in Luo Zhen's eyes, and he shouted, "Who is it? You're home. I haven't seen you for days." Hearing Luo Zhen's voice, the people outside quickly opened the door and came in. When they saw Luo Zhen sitting pale and slumped on the ground, they hurried forward. "What's wrong with you?" Helping Luo Zhen up and sitting on the bed, the person who opened the door had worries in his eyes. "I'm fine. I'm just a little hungry." Feeling a void in his belly, Luo Zhen looked at the girl in front of him and squeezed out a smile. The moment I saw this girl, memories about her came to my mind. Erza and Luo Zhen are good friends from the same village. The two have known each other since childhood because they were both orphans. They helped and supported each other a long time ago. But seeing the scarlet shoulder-length hair and the name Erza in front of him, Luo Zhen's eyes became a little complicated. Erza, Fei Red's long hair. Isn't this one of the protagonists in fairy tale? Erza shook her head. "The world of fairy tale. Are you hungry? I still have something to eat at home. I'll go and get it for you." Hearing a slight sound coming from Luo Zhen's belly, Erza got up and ran out of the house. Before Luo Zhen could speak, he had already disappeared from sight. Ding! Congratulations to the host for contacting one of the protagonists of the plot. Erza shook her at Ding. The system is officially activated. Please wait a moment. Ding! The system is activated and the system rewards are being activated. The moment Erza's back disappeared, Mechanical sounds echoed in Luo Zhen's ears. Luo Zhen's pupils shrank, and his eyes scanned the surroundings. System. Ding. The pirate system is on. Congratulations to the host for getting the chance to draw a character template. The system did not answer Luo Zhen's words, and a soft light curtain appeared in front of Luo Zhen's sight. A turntable flashed in the light curtain, and there were familiar images on the turntable. Whitebeard, Edward Newgate. Beasts, Kaido. Redhead, Shanks. Big MOM, Charlotte Lingling. Admiral Akainu, Sakaski. Pirate Hunter, Rollo Noah Zoro. Many familiar images appeared on the light curtain in front of him. Before Luo Zhen could understand clearly, the turntable in front of him started to spin. After a while, the turntable stopped slowly, and the turntable disappeared from Luo Zhen's sight. Then a picture appeared on the light curtain. For Emperors, Big MOM Charlotte Lingling. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Big MOM template. One of the 4 kings of the One Piece world. Is it fused? With the appearance of this picture, the sound of the system then echoed in Luo Zhen's ears. A little disappointment flashed in Luo Zhen's eyes when he saw that he didn't win Whitebeard or Kaido. But Big Mom is also one of the 4 emperors. Luo Zhen also silently accepted. Immediately, Luo Zhen suddenly remembered something and quickly asked the system, if I integrate the Big Mom template, will I also suffer from cravings? Thinking disorder is a weakness of Big Mom. After the onset, she completely loses her mind and attacks everyone around her indiscriminately. And he doesn't have any combat IQ. He won't dodge and defend. He can only attack indiscriminately. No, the host gets the Big Mom's ability template. Only the Big Mom's ability. Hearing the system's answer, Luo Zhen breathed a sigh of relief. Only getting the ability of Big Mom made Luo Zhen excited. In the world of One Piece, Big Mom is definitely one of the top powerhouses. Belongs to the first echelon of the One Piece world. He possessed incomparable strange strength and a body of steel at an early age. When he was 5 years old, the Man of Steel could not even break through the defenses of the Titans, and a slap could break the ribs of the Titans. One can imagine what kind of monster Big Mom is. After knowing that there would be no other sequelae, Luo Zhen said decisively, let's merge. Chapter 2, Big Mom Template. Guard this smile, let's merge. Luo Zhen's eyes became firm. As Luo Zhen's voice fell, the picture of Big Mom instantly turned into a stream of light and merged into Luo Zhen's body. As the streamer penetrated into Luo Zhen's body, a steady stream of power began to pour out of Luo Zhen's body, and the muscles on his body began to swell continuously. A severe pain began to erupt in the body. Luo Zhen clenched his teeth and forcibly endured the severe pain. Luo Zhen felt that there was a strong and powerful airflow constantly colliding in his body, widening the tendons in his body. This sharp pain repeatedly crushed Luo Zhen's spirit, and the bones seemed to be crushed and repaired by the air current. I don't know how long it took before the severe pain dissipated. Luo Zhen only felt his muscles twitch and tremble. After recovering for a while, Luo Zhen got up slowly. His limbs spasmed due to severe pain. The originally thin body has become burly, and even the height seems to have been abruptly raised a lot. Underneath this sturdy body lies endless power. Clenching his fist, Luo Zhen could clearly feel the inexhaustible strength in his body. Clenching his fist and punching forward, a loud noise rang in Luo Zhen's ears. The speed of punching was extremely fast, and only an afterimage flashed in the air. Directly ahead, on the wall of this dilapidated house, this punch directly shattered the wall. Just a fist wind directly blasted a big hole in the wall. Outside the big hole is a small forest. The trees in the forest seemed to be swept by some strong wind, and the trees were overturned to the ground. So strong. Luo Zhen didn't react for a while and muttered to himself, looking at the deserted scene not far away. The light curtain of the system then appeared in front of Luo Zhen. Host. Luo Zhen diecast abilities. Strange power, Man of Steel template. Big current template progress. 10% looking at the crude virtual panel on the light curtain in front of him. Luo Zhen's eyes gradually became serious. System, is it possible to obtain all the abilities of Big Mom by increasing the progress of the template? Luo Zhen's face was serious, and her immature voice sounded in the dilapidated small house. Yes, if you increase the progress of the template, you will be able to obtain the abilities and strengths of the template character. The mechanical sound of the system rang in his ears. Luo Zhen's eyes lit up slightly, and then he asked the system how to improve the progress of the character template. In this world, contacting the characters in the original book can improve the progress of the template, and the more important the character, the greater the progress of the improvement. After receiving the system's reply, Luo Zhen also understood, and a gleam flashed in his eyes. Did you get in touch with the characters in the original novel? I have only been in contact with Erza now, and I have directly obtained 10% of the progress. Then if you join Fairy Tail yourself, wouldn't you be able to quickly fill up Big Mom's template? But joining Fairy Tail is just another story. Luo Zhen remembers that in the original book, Erza and the children in the village were kidnapped by a dark magic order and taken to the Tower of Heaven to become slaves. Since I am here now, I can't let this happen. His eyes gradually became firm, and the turbulent power in his body was surging. Just when Luo Zhen was in a daze, Erza's figure suddenly appeared not far away. Holding a small package in his hand, he hurriedly looked at the big hole in the wall and the deserted scene outside. What happened? Luo Zhen turned his head and saw Erza standing at the door of the house, looking at Luo Zhen's back in panic. Looking at Erza, who was a little panicked, Luo Zhen didn't know how to explain to Erza for a while. Scratching his head, he pointed to the small package in Erza's hand and asked, "Is there food in this? I'm so hungry." Hearing Luo Zhen's words, Erza also put aside what he saw before and decided to ask what happened later. With a smile on his face, he came to sit next to Luo Zhen with the small package in his hand and placed the food in the package in front of Luo Zhen. "Eat quickly." With a smile on Erza's face, he looked at Luo Zhen expectantly. Seeing Erza's sincere eyes, Luo Zhen suddenly felt a surge of warmth in his heart. In 2 lifetimes, there was only one person who treated Luo Zhen so unconditionally in the previous life. That is the director of the orphanage. With a smile on Luo Zhen's face, he pointed to the food in the package and said, "You can eat some too." Erza hesitated for a while, then shook his head and said, "I'm not hungry. Eat quickly." At this moment, an untimely voice sounded in the dilapidated house. There was also a gurgling sound in Erza's stomach. Blushing, Erza turned his head aside. "Eat quickly," Luo Zhen smiled, and put the somewhat crude food into Erza's hands. Then he grabbed a piece of dry food and ate it. Looking at Luo Zhen, who was feasting, Erza stopped being hypocritical, grabbed the food in his hand, and stuffed it into his mouth. After simply filling their stomachs, the two couldn't help but smile at each other. Looking at the innocent smile on Erza's face, Luo Zhen couldn't help laughing from the bottom of his heart. If it was just because I watched this anime in my previous life, I fell in love with the role of Erza. So now it can be true that he has feelings for Erza. I swear to protect this innocent smile in front of me. With Big Mom's power and steel body, Luo Zhen doesn't have to worry about food and clothing for the time being. Normally, Luo Zhen would go to the forest around the village alone to rob. At the beginning, Erza was strongly restrained, although there were no monsters in the forest around the village. But there are many ferocious beasts in the forest. Most old hunters dare not go deep alone, let alone Luo Zhen, an 11-year-old boy. But after Luo Zhen showed his strength in front of Erza, Erza reluctantly let Luo Zhen go to the forest. For a long time to come, Luo Zhen was able to bring out some prey in the forest every day. In the beginning, it was just some small prey, such as rabbits and the like. Until one day, Luo Zhen walked out of the forest with an adult wild boar on his back, which directly shocked everyone in the village. Chapter 3: The Dark Magic Order Strikes. Attack in Rage. For a long time to come, Luo Zhen lived in peaceful days. Go hunting in the forest during the day, and you can have a good harvest every day. During this time, Erza has also grown up a lot, because there is no problem with the supply of food. Originally, at an age of growing up, Erza has been malnourished due to lack of food. Seeing Erza growing up gradually, Luo Zhen felt very relieved. In the village, Luo Zhen also met several characters from the original novel. Because it is only a supporting role in the original work, it only increases the progress a little. Looking at the current progress of only 13%, Luo Zhen secretly sighed. It is still a bit difficult to improve the progress in this village, and you still have to leave here. But before leaving the village, Luo Zhen needs to wait for the people from the Dark Magic Order to come here and settle their worries before Luo Zhen can leave with peace of mind. On this day, Luo Zhen got up early as usual and went to the forest. From a distance, I saw Erza standing at the entrance of the village, waiting for me. Seeing Luo Zhen coming, Erza trotted to Luo Zhen's side. I told you that you don't have to come and see me off every day. Looking at Erza, who was a little out of breath, Luo Zhen said with a helpless smile. How can I do that? I must watch you leave and come back safely. With an innocent smile on Erza's face, he pouted and said to Luo Zhen, all right. Seeing the somewhat stubborn Erza, Luo Zhen spread his hands helplessly. Every time Luo Zhen went hunting in the mountains, Erza would stand at the entrance of the village and wait for him. Whether going out or returning, you can see Erza's figure. I'm leaving. Looking at Erza, standing at the entrance of the village, Luo Zhen turned his head and waved to her. Seeing the back of Luo Zhen gradually going away, Erza put his hands around his mouth and shouted, be sure to come back safely. Not long after entering the mountain, Luo Zhen saw his favorite prey. It was an adult wild boar. The moment Luo Zhen saw this wild boar, Luo Zhen's eyes lit up. He rushed straight out of the grass, staring straight at the wild boar. The wild boar also found Luo Zhen at the first time, looking at Luo Zhen with two eyes vigilantly. Licking his somewhat dry lips, Luo Zhen's footsteps slammed on the ground, and he rushed out directly. An afterimage flashed in the wild boar's sight, and suddenly Luo Zhen's figure came to the wild boar's side. He clenched his fist and punched the wild boar on the back. Accompanied by a shrill scream, the wild boar collapsed on the ground and struggled continuously, spitting blood from its mouth. Not long after, the boar's body stopped struggling and was directly crushed to death by Luo Zhen's punch. On the side, he smashed a big tree in half and found some vines to tie the wild boar's body to the trunk of the big tree. Luo Zhen carried the tree trunk and walked down the mountain. In the distance, Luo Zhen saw several figures at the entrance of the village. It was Erza and the others. Look, is that Luo Zhen? It seems to be him. What is that on his back? It's so big. A few friends also found Luo Zhen, who was going down the mountain, and pointed to Luo Zhen, who was carrying a huge tree trunk, and said in surprise. Erza trotted all the way towards Luo Zhen. Running in front of Luo Zhen, Erza gasped and looked at the wild boar on Luo Zhen's back, and was so shocked that he couldn't speak. What is this? Erza had never seen a whole wild boar, and this wild boar, which was bigger than the old cattle cultivated in the village, made Erza a little scared. Wild boar, how is it? Great. Luo Zhen stretched out his hand and rubbed Erza's little head, and the two walked towards the village side by side. Several friends at the entrance of the village also ran over, looking at the huge wild boar on Luo Zhen's back in surprise. Back home, Luo Zhen peeled off the wild boar skin and divided the meat into pieces. Erza, share this meat with everyone in the village. Some of the better places were reserved, and most of the rest Luo Zhen planned to distribute to the people in the village. After the parents of Luo Zhen and Erza passed away, they were brought up by everyone in the village. The two of them grew up eating hundreds of meals and wearing hundreds of clothes. Erza nodded happily, took a large piece of meat from Luo Zhen's hand, and ran towards the village bouncing around. Wiping off his sweat, Luo Zhen looked at Erza's back with a smile on his face. As night fell, the duo of Luo Zhen and Erza got together for dinner. After eating and drinking, the two sat on the stairs in the yard, looking at the stars in the sky. What a nice view. There seemed to be stars in his eyes. Erza muttered to himself, looking at the starlight in the sky. Hello, Luo Zhen, suddenly. Erza turned his head and looked at Luo Zhen. Erza suddenly called out his name. Luo Zhen was a little puzzled, turned his head and looked at Erza, and said with a smile, "What's wrong?" Looking at the gentle smile on Luo Zhen's face, Erza seemed to be infected by this gentle smile, with a pure and innocent smile on his face, and said to Luo Zhen with a smile, "We will always be together in the future." Most definitely, Luo Zhen stretched out his hand and rubbed Erza's little head and replied with a chuckle, "Well, I will definitely." Erza was very happy to get Luo Zhen's reply and nodded heavily. "Then I'll go back first. See you tomorrow." Erza stood up, jumped, and ran out of the house with his hands behind his back. Watching Erza's back disappear into the darkness, Luo Zhen also turned his head and returned to his room. Lying on the bed, Luo Zhen looked at the dark room, slowly falling asleep. Suddenly, there was a violent explosion outside the door, which woke Luo Zhen up. Suddenly jumping up from the bed, Luo Zhen rushed out of the house. Seeing the flames of the village not far away, Luo Zhen suddenly became nervous. With a sharp step on the ground, the whole person rushed out. Explosions sounded from time to time in the village, and Luo Zhen's eyes became serious and fierce. Suddenly, two figures in black robes rushed out of the alley not far away. The eyes of the two people lit up when they saw Luo Zhen, who was running wildly, and they approached Luo Zhen grinning ferociously. "The little devil who came to your door. Go away." Luo Zhen's complexion sank, and he let out an angry shout. He clenched his fist and punched one of the black-robed figures directly. The fist hit the chest of the black-robed figure, and suddenly a loud explosion sounded from the side of the remaining black-robed figure. The upper body of the companion next to him was directly smashed by Luo Zhen's punch, and flesh and blood splashed around. Chapter 4: The Raging Luo Zhen. "We will always be together. Go away." Looking at the two men in black robes who appeared not far away, Luo Zhen let out a roar. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the two black-robed figures. The two of them didn't even realize when Luo Zhen appeared in front of them. Clenching his fist tightly, he punched one of the black-robed figures on the chest. There was a violent explosion, and the remaining figure in black robe turned his head in a daze. Looking at the half-corpse beside him, the remaining black-robed figure was terrified and fell to his knees on the ground with a plop. Why is it said to be half a corpse? Because the black-robed figure was hit in the chest by Luo Zhen's punch, and the upper body was directly smashed by the punch. Blood splattered everywhere. His body kept receding to the back, but he could touch the flesh and blood of his companion casually with his palm on the ground. "Ah!" With a shrill scream, the black-robed figure stared at Luo Zhen, whose face was stained with blood and horror. Boom! Before the man in black could plead for mercy, Luo Zhen kicked him on the head. His head exploded like a watermelon. Looking at the bloody scene in front of him, Luo Zhen, who had killed someone for the first time, not only did not feel the slightest bit of nausea in his heart. On the contrary, there is a feeling of excitement spreading in the bottom of my heart. The scarlet look in his eyes flashed away, and Luo Zhen took a step and ran towards Erza's house. On the road, I met many villagers in the village. They wanted to escape with Luo Zhen, but Luo Zhen refused. Luo Zhen looked fiercely at the burning houses around him, and from time to time, several members of the dark magic sect in black robes appeared. Without exception, the black mages of the dark magic order who appeared were all killed by Luo Zhen with one blow. Bloody scenes, even if these scenes are mixed in the dark magic order, black mages who have seen countless horrible scenes are afraid. Soon, Luo Zhen arrived at the door of Erza's house. Rushing into the house, Luo Zhen went straight to Erza's bedroom. But the door of the room had been destroyed, and Luo Zhen's eyes flashed with ferocious killing intent. Turning his head and rushing out of the house, Luo Zhen searched the village. In a small alley, Erza hides in a corner with a girl scared. The girl trembled all over and hid tightly behind Erza. "It's okay, Kagura. I'm here." Although Erza was also very scared, he still held on and forced a smile to comfort the girl behind him. Seeing a basket not far away, Erza carefully led the girl to the side of the basket. Stuffing the girl into the basket, he said to the girl in a low voice, You must not come out. I must not come out until I come to you." The girl suppressed her fear and nodded, watching Erza cover the basket. Seeing the black-robed man selected to search, Erza rushed out directly in their line of sight. "There's a kid over there." Seeing Erza's fleeing back, the two black-robed men showed joy and chased after Erza's back. Although Erza's body nutrition has kept up in the past 6 months, he is still only a child after all. Soon he was forced into a dead end by two men in black robes. Looking at the black-robed man approaching step by step in horror, Erza closed his eyes in fear. "Try FG her." Suddenly, an angry voice exploded in Erza's ear. Opening his eyes, a figure appeared behind the two men in black robes. "Luo Zhen, run!" Seeing Luo Zhen's figure appear, Erza was not surprised at the first time, but was afraid that Luo Zhen would also be taken away, so he quickly shouted at Luo Zhen. "Ha ha! Here comes another little devil." The man in black showed surprise and walked towards Luo Zhen, who had thrown himself into the trap. "Erza, are you okay?" Luo Zhen completely ignored the man in black robe who was coming before him, and asked Erza, who was curled up in the corner. "Go away, Luo Zhen. Leave me alone." Watching one of the black-robed men reaching out to grab Luo Zhen, Erza shouted. A smile appeared on Luo Zhen's blood-stained face, and a gentle voice reached Erza's ears. "Erza, close your eyes. It will be over soon." For some reason, Luo Zhen's gentle voice rang in Erza's ear, immediately calming down Erza's frightened heart. He closed his eyes and prayed that Luo Zhen could leave safely. Seeing Erza close his eyes, the gentle smile on Luo Zhen's face dissipated, and a scarlet flash flickered in his eyes. The palm of the black-robed man in front of him was about to land on Luo Zhen's collar. Luo Zhen punched fiercely and swept forward. There was a bang. The upper body of the man in black was directly smashed by Luo Zhen's punch. Kicking half of the corpse in front of him aside, Luo Zhen walked towards the remaining men in black with a cold face. The man in black was completely taken aback by the scene in front of him. After he regained his composure, Luo Zhen was about to appear in front of him. The man in black came to his senses and was about to rush towards Erza with big strides, trying to hold Erza hostage. Just as his palm was about to catch Erza, his arm stopped suddenly, accompanied by shrill screams. Luo Zhen appeared beside him, holding his arm with one hand and his body with the other. Brutally tore off her arms and body. Blood gushed out, most of which fell on Luo Zhen's body, standing in front of Erza, blocking all the blood splashing out. "I said, if you dare to touch her, you will die." A low moan like a god of death rang in the ears of the man in black. The next moment, the man in black was kicked out by Luo Zhen. He slammed into the distant wall heavily, and when his neck was tilted, he became silent. Wiping the blood off his face, Luo Zhen turned around and looked at the trembling Erza. "Okay, Erza, open your eyes." Luo Zhen didn't face Erza. He didn't want the young Erza to see his bloody scene. Opening his eyes, looking at Luo Zhen's tall back, Erza directly reached out and hugged Luo Zhen. Completely ignoring Luo Zhen's blood-stained clothes, she pressed her cheek against Luo Zhen's back. "Luo Zhen, we will always be together." Stretching out his hand to touch Erza's little head behind him, Luo Zhen took Erza's tender little hand and walked out of the alley, etc. Suddenly, Erza seemed to have thought of something and pulled Luo Zhen towards the alley not far away. In a basket in the alley, Erza opened the basket to reveal a little girl with purple hair. "Kagura, it's all right." Chapter 5, 3-Color Domineering. "You can't break my defense." "Kagura, it's all right." In the basket, Erza will be a girl with purple hair. The moment the girl came out of the basket, she got into Erza's arms directly and looked at Luo Zhen behind Erza in horror. Seeing Kagura, who was a little scared, Erza glanced at Luo Zhen behind him with apologetic eyes, then leaned into Kagura's ear and said softly to her, "Don't be afraid. He is a good person." After being comforted for a while, Kagura's mood stabilized a bit, poked his head to look furtively at Luo Zhen, and retracted his head behind Erza. "Erza, you guys follow me. Go find someone else." After wasting a while, the sound of explosions in the village gradually stopped, and he looked solemnly at the village not far away that was completely shrouded in flames. Erza nodded, took Kagura's little hand, and followed behind Luo Zhen. The three set off, searching the streets, trying to find survivors in the village. Ding! Congratulations to the host's Big Mom template progress to 15%, and the primary 3-color domineering. Suddenly, the voice of the system sounded in his mind. As the sound of the system fell, Luo Zhen's mind suddenly appeared the method of using the 3-color domineering. Eyes brightened slightly. Luo Zhen turned his head and glanced at Kagura behind Erza. The domineering aura of knowledge and knowledge is activated, covering a range of tens of meters around. The three of them walked quickly in the village, looking at the surrounding ruins with vigilance. Suddenly, Luo Zhen at the front stopped and waved to Erza behind him. Seeing Luo Zhen's movements, Erza and the two quickly stopped their progress and hid in the ruins beside them. Seeing that the two of Erza hid themselves, Luo Zhen stepped on the ground fiercely, and cracks like spider webs appeared on the ground instantly. The body rushed out, turning into an afterimage and disappearing into the night sky. The next moment, there was a loud explosion in a dilapidated house not far away. Luo Zhen directly smashed through the wall of the dilapidated house, sending bricks flying everywhere. In the room, a man in a black robe was pressing down on a woman with a ferocious face. He kept spitting out obscene words from his mouth. The pressed woman was struggling continuously. Her face was worthy of the flushed slap marks, and her cheeks were already swollen. The clothes on his body were torn, but under the strong strength of the man, the struggle was completely useless. The sound of crashing into the wall immediately caught the man's attention, and he looked towards Luo Zhen. The moment he turned his head around, Luo Zhen's figure appeared beside him. With a strong killing intent flashing in his eyes, he gave the man a cold look. The next moment, Luo Zhen grabbed the man's head with both hands and twisted hard to break the man's neck. The head has come to a 360-degree turn. The man in black robe didn't even have a clear look at Luo Zhen's face, and he just fell aside with blank eyes. Luo Zhen looked at the woman on the bed with tears all over her face and a swollen face. Looking away, he pulled a piece of clothing from the bed and threw it at the woman. "Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Watching Luo Zhen's back leave, the woman looked at the black-robed man's body on the ground, her eyes filled with hatred. He pulled out a pair of scissors from nowhere and vented his anger on the corpse like crazy. I said several times of thanks to Luo Zhen's back. Walking out of the room, Luo Zhen's complexion became extremely cold. After finding Erza, Luo Zhen looked at them solemnly and said, "Hide here well. Don't leave here. I'll go and deal with these people and come back to you. And don't come out until I come back." Looking at Luo Zhen, whose face was stained scarlet with blood, Erza nodded heavily. Bainen's palm landed on the back of Luo Zhen's hand, looked at Luo Zhen seriously, and said, "I will wait for you to come back." Luo Zhen nodded, smashing the wall beside him with a punch. The splash stones were scattered on the ground. Luo Zhen made a simple shelter for Erza and the two in the corner and sealed the entrance. Under the perception of knowledge and domineering, there are no members of the dark magic order around. After taking a look at the stone pile in front of him, Luo Zhen left here after feeling that it was not easy to be exposed. With ferocious killing intent emerging in his eyes, Luo Zhen ran wildly on the street. After a while, a group of members of the dark magic order were sensed by Luo Zhen's sense of knowledge. What sound? What is that? Under Luo Zhen's furious running, the members of the dark magic order quickly discovered Luo Zhen. With horror on his face, he watched an afterimage flash before his eyes. The headed one was directly smashed in the head by Luo Zhen's punch. Before the rest of the crowd could react, Luo Zhen rushed into the dark magic sect and killed all directions like a tiger jumping into a flock. In a short while, these dozen people were slaughtered by Luo Zhen. Looking at the stumped limbs and broken arms all over the ground, Luo Zhen didn't have the slightest pity in his eyes. He turned around and rushed out of the village. Just now, Luo Zhen left a mouth alive, and found out under interrogation. They belonged to the rear team, and the large force had already left the village. This village is not big. Luo Zhen's speed is very fast, and he arrived at the entrance of the village in less than a moment. Select the faintly visible bunches of fire. Swinging away some dried blood on his fist, Luo Zhen strode towards the distant flames. Because Luo Zhen was making too much noise, he was spotted by the dark magic sect from far away. But because of the darkness, the people of the dark magic order didn't realize what it was, watching vigilantly in the direction of the loud noise. Go to hell. The moment they saw Luo Zhen's figure clearly, Luo Zhen had already appeared in front of their eyes in an instant. With a roar full of rage, he killed a black-robed man with one punch. There are enemies. With the appearance of Luo Zhen, everyone in the dark magic order became vigilant and quickly made countermeasures. Dozens of people formed a circle, tightly surrounding Luo Zhen. Behind this human wall, several figures holding staffs stood behind them. These figures held staffs and were covered in black robes. At this moment, a magic circle suddenly appeared on the ground under Luo Zhen's feet. Countless soil thorns suddenly appeared under Luo Zhen's feet, and the soil thorns rushed out of the ground in an instant and directly pierced towards Luo Zhen. Just when they thanked the Black Mage for thinking it was a success, the smoke cleared, and Luo Zhen was unscathed in their sight. The soil spike that broke through the ground couldn't even break through Luo Zhen's defense. Chapter 6, He's a Monster. To be loathed and feared. As the smoke cleared, Luo Zhen's figure reappeared in the sight of these men in black. The earth thorns that broke through from the ground rushed towards Luo Zhen, but they couldn't pierce Luo Zhen's skin at all. On Luo Zhen's skin, there is an invisible armor. The arm color is domineering, which can greatly enhance the defense. The people in black robes suddenly panicked and looked at the bloody Luo Zhen in horror. With a wave of his arm, he shattered the soil thorn on his chest in front of him, and Luo Zhen's eyes gleamed with killing intent. Looking at the people in black robes forming a circle around him, Luo Zhen had a sinister smile on his face. There was a loud bang. The ground under Luo Zhen's feet exploded instantly, and cracks spread like spiderwebs. Luo Zhen's figure turned into an afterimage, and he rushed directly to the man in black robe who was closest to him. A punch blasted out, directly smashing the body of the man in black. Flesh splattered, and scarlet was everywhere. Before the people in black robes could react, Luo Zhen directly broke through the encirclement and charged towards the group of mages behind them. Stop him! The mages reacted and shouted at the black robes around them with horror in their eyes. But as soon as his words fell, Luo Zhen's figure had appeared in front of him. Before he could raise the staff in his hand to release the magic, Luo Zhen had already grabbed his arm. With the force of Luo Zhen's hands, he directly tore his arm off. Blood spewed out like a fountain, and the splashed blood was everywhere. Ah! The shrill screams echoed in the night. Luo Zhen smashed the wizard's head with one punch, and then rushed towards the other black-robed people. Possessing strange powers and bodies of steel, these men in black robes are no match for Luo Zhen at all. In less than a moment, most of them were slaughtered, and blood was sprayed everywhere. Wiping the scarlet blood off his face, Luo Zhen's face became even more ferocious. The people in black robes had already started to flee, rushing towards the surrounding mountains and forests. Luo Zhen glanced at the prison cars not far away and rushed straight towards the fleeing black robes. The screams echoed continuously in the forest, and Luo Zhen's figure was like an evil ghost seeking his life, constantly passing by every man in black. In the next moment, the body of the man in black was smashed to pieces like a watermelon that exploded. The blood turned the mountain forest into a blood red, and there was a strong smell of blood in the air. I don't know how long it has passed. Luo Zhen walked out of the mountain forest with sticky blood all over his body. Shaking off the dried blood on his fist, Luo Zhen walked towards the prison cars. Inside the prison van were villagers from the same village as Luo Zhen. There are also some people from other villages. When these people saw Luo Zhen, who was covered in blood, their eyes suddenly showed horror. It was like seeing some horrible monster. Even the villagers in the same village couldn't help but feel a little scared when they saw Luo Zhen open the prison van and release the imprisoned villagers. "Everyone, it's all right. Let's all go back." With a smile on his scarlet face, Luo Zhen looked at the villagers in the same village and said. Luo Zhen thought that the smile on his face was very kind, but this bloody smile looked more and more terrifying to other people. The villagers in the same village were all right, and some others even collapsed on the ground because of Luo Zhen's fright. Are you really little Luo Zhen?" At this time, a middle-aged man tremblingly asked Luo Zhen. "Uncle Keel, I'm not Luo Zhen. Who else could I be?" Looking at the fear on the middle-aged man's face, Luo Zhen sighed in his heart, squeezed out a smile, and said to him with a smile. Everyone looked at each other, looking at the stumped limbs and arms around them. They were still a little scared. Some people even vomited from the horror of the scene. "Uncle Kier, it's all right. You can go back." After a moment of silence, Luo Zhen raised his eyelids and glanced over everyone. Seeing the fearful and disgusted eyes of everyone, Luo Zhen said something, then turned around and walked towards the village. Looking at Luo Zhen's back, everyone didn't know what to do for a while. Gritting their teeth, the villagers of the same village decided to return to the village. Looking at the leaving villagers, some people were a little panicked. Looking at the surrounding dark mountains and forests and the broken limbs and arms all over the ground, they decided to keep up. Back in the village, Luo Zhen went straight to Erza's direction. Moving the stone away, the figures of Erza and Kagura appeared in Luo Zhen's sight. The moment the stone was removed, Erza was holding a wooden stick tightly in his hand, watching the hole vigilantly. After seeing that it was Luo Zhen, he breathed a sigh of relief, dropped the stick, and got out of the hole. The moment he got out of the hole, Erza saw the bloody Luo Zhen by the moonlight. Panic appeared in Erza's eyes. He rushed to Luo Zhen in a hurry, looking at Luo Zhen helplessly. Are you hurt? What to do? What should I do? I'm fine. I'm not hurt. It's not my blood." Looking at Erza, who was already crying out of anxiety, Luo Zhen showed a smile on his face and was about to reach out and caress Erza's little head as usual. Seeing that he was raised in midair, he suddenly saw blood on his hand, and his arm stopped. At this moment, Erza suddenly reached out and grabbed Luo Zhen's arm and put Luo Zhen's palm on his head, rubbing against Luo Zhen's palm like a kitten. "It's okay. I said I will always be with Luo Zhen." An innocent smile appeared on Erza's face, and he didn't care that Luo Zhen was soaked in blood at all. Kagura on the side stood blankly, looking at the scarlet face of Luo Zhen, but showing a gentle smile. The whole person just stood there blankly. But after a while, there was a commotion from the entrance of the village not far away. The three looked towards the entrance of the village, and the villagers all came back. Kagura saw a familiar figure in the crowd. His eyes turned red immediately, and he rushed towards that figure. "Big brother." With a cry in his voice, Kagura threw himself into the arms of a boy, holding the boy tightly with both hands. Seeing Kagura in his arms, the boy froze for a moment, then became excited, hugging Kagura in his arms tightly. "Great, Kagura. I haven't been able to find you. Great that you're okay." Chapter 7, I want to get out of here. Can't leave me. Seeing Kagura and Simon embracing each other tightly, Erza couldn't help smiling. Suddenly, Erza saw the villagers behind Simon with a different look in their eyes. Following the eyes of the villagers, they finally landed on Luo Zhen. Erza's eyes moved slightly, and he quickly came to Luo Zhen's side, holding Luo Zhen's palm tightly. Not far away, Simon let go of Kagura in his arms and took Kagura's little hand to Luo Zhen. Without saying a word, he bowed deeply to Luo Zhen. "Thank you, Luo Zhen." Before that, Simon thought that Luo Zhen's death-like figure was a little intimidating. But after learning that Luo Zhen saved Kagura, Simon could only be grateful to Luo Zhen from the bottom of his heart. Luo Zhen smiled and said to Simon, "You must protect your sister from now on." Speaking of which, Luo Zhen looked at the villagers who were a little afraid of him in the distance, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Luo Zhen turned directly and walked towards his home. Seeing the back of Luo Zhen leaving, Erza turned his head and glanced at the villagers, with a look of disappointment in his eyes. Quickly followed Luo Zhen, grabbed Luo Zhen's palm, and left here together. It wasn't until the crowd could no longer see Luo Zhen's back that the scene became noisy. Because of the emergence of the Dark Magic Order, the children in the village were taken away, and some villagers who fought hard were brutally killed by the Dark Magic Order. The villagers returned to their homes, looking at the dilapidated houses and the dead bodies lying on the ground without moving. A sense of sadness spread in the village. Back home, Luo Zhen asked Erza to sit down and rest for a while. I took a bath in the pool in the backyard by myself to wash off the sticky blood on my body. As the water washed over Luo Zhen's body, the bright red blood flowed continuously to the ground along the water. After washing for a long time, Luo Zhen finally washed the dried blood off his body. Putting on clean clothes, Luo Zhen found Erza, said to Erza with a serious face, "Erza, I want to leave the village." Hearing Luo Zhen's words, Erza was startled, quickly got up and raised his head, looking into Luo Zhen's eyes. There was firmness in Luo Zhen's eyes, and after Erza saw this firmness, he knew he couldn't persuade Luo Zhen. With a smile on his face, he reached out and grabbed Luo Zhen's palm and said to Luo Zhen with a smile, "Then let's leave together." Their parents have passed away, and there is nothing to remember in this village. Although Erza is somewhat reluctant to part with the village where he grew up, he has to choose between this village and Luo Zhen. Erza will choose Luo Zhen without hesitation. Looking at Erza with a firm face, Luo Zhen also showed a gentle smile on his face. "Then let's pack up and leave tomorrow." The reason why Luo Zhen didn't take Erza away from the village earlier was that he wouldn't be harassed by the dark magic sect, because Luo Zhen can't let go of this village. After Luo Zhen received the memories of his predecessor, he also knew that everyone in the village took good care of Luo Zhen. After gaining strength, Luo Zhen still decided to protect them once. Now the night of hunting children is over, and all the members of the Dark Magic Order have also been killed by Luo Zhen. The village is also safe. Luo Zhen was able to leave with peace of mind. Erza nodded heavily, and accompanied by Luo Zhen, he returned to his home to pack his luggage. Said it was luggage, but in fact there was nothing there. Apart from a few worn-out clothes, there was nothing else. After packing up the clothes, Erza looked back at the room where he grew up, and there was still some reluctance in his eyes. But looking back at Luo Zhen not far away, Erza's eyes became firm, and he resolutely walked towards Luo Zhen with the package on his back. Coming to Luo Zhen's side, Erza raised his face and said with a smile on his face, "Let's go. Back home, because there's only one bed at home." Luo Zhen let Erza sleep on the bed, and he spread a layer of fur on the ground. Because of hunting for so long, Luo Zhen left a lot of fur at home. With his hands behind his head, the roof is dilapidated, and the moonlight shines into the room through the holes. "Luo Zhen, are you asleep?" At this time, Erza's voice reached Luo Zhen's ears. Not yet. Luo Zhen lay straight on the ground, staring at the roof without squinting, and replied, "Although I don't know what happened to you, I hope you can promise me one thing." Hearing Luo Zhen's voice, Erza seemed to feel relieved a lot, and the soft voice reached Luo Zhen's ears. "You must not abandon me in the future. I will work hard to become stronger, and I will always be by your side. No matter what hell is ahead, I will face it with you, so you can't abandon me." Erza's voice was soft but firm. There is no rhetoric. Luo Zhen's voice is very small, but when it reaches Erza's ears, it makes her feel at ease. After a while, the room fell into silence again, and the sound of insects outside the house rang in my ears. Under the music played by nature, the two of Luo Zhen soon fell into a dreamland. The stars moved, and the night passed silently. The sun shone into the house through the hole in the roof, and a beam of sunlight just fell on Luo Zhen's face. Opening his sleepy eyes, Luo Zhen subconsciously stretched out his hands in front of him, blocking the dazzling sunlight. "You're awake." The movement of Luo Zhen soon alarmed Erza outside the house. Erza is now like a little cook, wearing an apron and holding a spatula in her hand, standing happily in front of the door. Luo Zhen yawned and sat up from the ground with his right hand propped up. "What are you doing?" Rubbing his sleepy eyes, looking at Erza's outfit, Luo Zhen asked with some doubts. "I think you were so tired yesterday. You must be hungry after waking up today, so I'll get up early and make you something to eat." Erza stuck out his tongue and said with a little blush on his face. At this time, a burning smell spread into the house. Erza suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, my food is going to be mushy." Chapter 8. Meet Mrs. Carlo. What a precocious child. My food is going to be burnt." Suddenly, Erza exclaimed and ran out of the house with the spatula in hand. Luo Zhen came outside the house and saw Erza busy in the corner of the yard. His petite back looked like an adult. After a while, Erza looked at the dishes on the table with a pure smile on his face. Nodding in satisfaction, he suddenly saw Luo Zhen sitting on the threshold, looking at him with a smile on his face. A blush appeared on Erza's face, and she said coquettishly to Luo Zhen, "What are you looking at? Come and eat." Luo Zhen nodded and sat at the table with a smile on his face, looking at the dishes on the table that didn't look very good. Luo Zhen took a deep breath and immediately started eating. Seeing Luo Zhen gobbling it up, Erza immediately beamed with joy, resting his chin with both hands, just looking at Luo Zhen quietly. "You eat too. Why are you looking at me?" Seeing Erza looking at him so quietly, Luo Zhen swallowed what was in his mouth and tapped Erza's forehead lightly with his hand. Sticking out his tongue, Erza ate the food in small mouthfuls with the bowl in his hand. After eating and drinking, Erza wanted to wash the dishes. Luo Zhen stopped her from cleaning up the dishes and said to Erza, "Don't clean up. I don't know if I will come back. Just throw this away." Erza shook his head resolutely, cleaned and arranged the rice bowls neatly, and then walked out of the room. Walking beside Luo Zhen with a small package on his back, he looked at the dilapidated village behind him with some reluctance. The two stood at the entrance of the village. Erza's eyes were a little sad. Born and raised in this place, this is the first time Erza wants to leave here, and he is really reluctant in his heart. Turning his head and glanced at Luo Zhen, who was not far away, Erza's eyes gradually became firm, and he ran towards Luo Zhen without looking back. "Let's go." With a smile on his face, Erza looked up at Luo Zhen and said, "Let's go." Luo Zhen stretched out his hand to touch Erza's little head, turned his head and glanced at the village behind him, and then the two walked towards the mountain forest. This is the only way out. After walking for more than a day after leaving the village, I have not seen other villages or towns. Luo Zhen brought a rabbit-down quilt at home when he set off. It was still a bit cold at night. Luo Zhen's constitution was not afraid of the cold, but Erza was not. When arriving at the hotel, Luo Zhen took Erza to hunt and found a place to sleep at night. After walking for several days, I was about to walk out of this huge mountain forest. On this day, Luo Zhen took Erza to deal with the rabbit he just killed. The aroma of roasted rabbits wafts through the forest. Suddenly, there was a sound in the bushes behind Luo Zhen and the two of them. Erza's expression suddenly became tense, and he quickly got up and hid behind Luo Zhen. This happens from time to time these days. Often, ferocious beasts suddenly appeared in the bushes and directly attacked the two of them. In a large package on the side, there's also a complete tiger skin. Luo Zhen looked at the bushes vigilantly, and under the arrogance of his knowledge, he saw a person in the bushes. Oh, I'm exhausted. There was an incoherent sound from the bushes, and a short old man got out of the bushes and patted the sticky leaves on his body vigorously. He raised his head and saw two children looking at him vigilantly. The old man showed a smile on his face and waved to the two of them. "Hello, you all. Who are you?" Looking at the kind-faced old man in front of him, Erza's tension eased a lot. Walking out from behind Luo Zhen, he asked the old man curiously, "Grandpa, why are you alone in this forest?" "Well, that's a long story." The old man was silent for a while, scratched his head, and said with a smile. At this time, the old man's eyes suddenly fell on the roasted rabbit beside the two. His eyes lit up, and he asked Erza with some expectation, "I'm a little hungry. Can you share some of your food with me?" Erza raised his head and glanced at Luo Zhen beside him. Luo Zhen stared straight at the short old man. then smiled and said, "Of course you can eat. Why are you two in the forest? There are many beasts in this forest." After eating and drinking enough, the old man put his hands on the ground and asked Luo Zhen and the two curiously. "Luo Zhen is very strong. Beasts are no match for Luo Zhen at all." Hearing the old man's words, Erza showed a proud look on his face, patted Luo Zhen's arm beside him, and said, "Oh, is it so powerful?" The old man looked Luo Zhen up and down, and then asked, "Are you homeless?" Erza fell silent, but the next moment he grabbed Luo Zhen's arm and said with a smile, "Where is Luo Zhen? That's Erza's home." "Your name is Erza. What a nice name." Really, the young devil is so precocious. Is he starting to fall in love now? The old man muttered, curled his lips, and looked at the two. "Grandpa, are you leaving the forest?" "We're about to set off." "Bury the bonfire for roasting rabbits with soil?" Erza asked the old man. "Where are you going?" The old man stood up and patted the dirt on his buttocks. "If you have nowhere to go, follow me." As soon as these words were spoken, Erza's eyes suddenly became vigilant. "I'm not a human trafficker. I'm the president of a magician's guild." The old man grinned, showing his bright teeth, and said with a smile, "The Magister's Guild? What's that?" Erza raised his head and looked at Luo Zhen beside him in confusion. When the old man appeared, Luo Zhen had already recognized his identity. Chairman of Fairy Tale, Mr. Carlo. The Magister's Guild is a big family formed by the gathering of many wizards. In the guild, everyone is like a family. When it comes to Fairy Tale, Carlos the horse is bursting with pride. "Luo Zhen, shall we go with him, then?" After all, she is an inexperienced girl, and Erza was a little moved by Mrs. Carlo's exhortation. She looked at Luo Zhen expectantly and asked, "Then let's go with him." It was Luo Zhen's goal to go to the Fairy Tale, but he didn't expect to meet the horseman Carlo on the way. The two followed the horseman Carlos out of the forest, and soon came to a small town nearby. Chapter 9, Welcome to Fairy Tale. I am the strongest in front of a magnificent building. Ma Karloff showed pride and pushed the door open. Turning around, he wanted to say something to Luo Zhen and the two behind him. Suddenly, a wine bottle flew out of the building and hit the horseman Carlos on the head. After a moment of silence, Carlos turned around with a gloomy face. There was a loud noise. The three of them looked over and saw that many people were fighting in the building. "Enough!" Mrs. Carlo was trembling slightly and walked into the guild with a gloomy expression. With a loud roar, the noisy guild suddenly fell silent. All eyes were on Carlos the horse. "President, you are back." "Welcome back, President." After a short while of silence, a louder voice sounded again. Everyone had smiles on their faces and greeted Carlos the horse. Carlos Ma was trembling, looked at the guild that looked like a garbage dump, and walked into the guild without saying a word. Leaping up from the bar, Karloff's eyes swept over everyone one by one. "How many times have I said it? No fighting in the guild, BD." With a dark face, Ma Karloff yelled at the people in front of him who seemed to have nothing to do with him. Everyone turned their eyes elsewhere, as if they were not talking about themselves. "When I'm not in the guild, why don't you manage everyone well?" Looking at a middle-aged uncle, Ma Karloff immediately yelled at him. "President, they're all monsters. How can I control them?" Macau was crying, as if he had been wronged. "President, don't listen to Macau's nonsense. Today is entirely because of Macau to provoke Mira Jane, and Mira Jane beat me up." Suddenly, a figure jumped out and angrily complained to Mr. Carlo the horse. "Damn it, Wakaba, you traitor!" Macau's face turned black, and he pointed at the man biting the pipe with trembling fingers. "Call!" Ma Karloff exhaled deeply, comforting himself in the bottom of his heart. It's okay. These are my family members. I want to be more tolerant to them." With a smile on his face, he said to everyone present, "Today, I have something to announce." Everyone focused on Mr. Carlo, curiously looking at what Mr. Carlo wanted to say. "Our guild has welcomed 2 new members. Let's welcome them." Ma Karloff gestured his palm towards the door. Luo Zhen and Erza Zheng stood at the door. Erza hid behind Luo Zhen with some fear, poking out a small head to look at the noisy crowd in the guild. "Wow, the newcomer looks so handsome. Welcome, Green Hands." Ma Karloff jumped off the bar, walked up to Luo Zhen, and the two of them stretched out his palms to them and said with a smile, "Welcome to Fairy Tale." They exchanged glances with Erza and saw that Erza stretched out his palm to put on the palm of the groom Carlo. Luo Zhen immediately stretched out his palm and said to Mrs. Carlo with a smile, "Thank you, President." In front of Luo Zhen, a virtual light curtain that only Luo Zhen can see floats in front of him. Seeing that the progress of Big Mom's template has increased to 85% in an instant, the smile on the corner of Luo Zhen's mouth became brighter and brighter. The system reward Luo Zhen has not claimed yet and is stored in the system space. "Oh, little brother, my name is Macau, and I'm an old man of the Fairy Tale Guild. If you need any help in the future, just ask me. Hi, my name is Lisana, and I'm also a wizard from Fairy Tale. What's your name?" Macau walked up to Luo Zhen, hooked Luo Zhen's shoulder, and said with a smile. Another silver-haired girl walked up to Erza, asked Erza with a smile on her face. Erza raised his head and looked at Luo Zhen, summoned up his courage, and said to Lisana, "My name is Erza. I don't have a last name." After speaking, Erza bowed his head with a little inferiority. "Wow, your scarlet hair is so beautiful." Lisana caressed Erza's scarlet hair curiously. Her eyes were like stars shining. Erza raised his head, looked at the girl with a bright smile in front of him, and couldn't help but smile on his face. Mao, don't underestimate Luo Zhen. He's really strong." On the side, Carlos Ma looked at the putting on airs of Macau and said with a sneer on his face. Macau didn't listen to Mrs. Carlo's words at all, waved his hands and said, "Oh, it's just a little devil. How strong can it be?" Suddenly, there was a loud noise in the guild. "Macau, are you looking down on children?" A figure shrouded in terror walked out step by step, staring fiercely at Macau and roaring. "Except for Mira Jane, of course. Mira Jane is our guild's top rookie." Macau trembled all over. With a smile on his face, he waved his hand to the visitor and said, "I'll spare you this time." The visitor had long silver hair and was wearing a midriff-bearing outfit like a little girl with a pair of shorts on her lower body. His eyes looked up and down on the young man in front of him. "It doesn't look like much," Mira Jane pouted, completely ignoring Luo Zhen. "Sister Mira, you can't be so rude." Lisana on the side pouted, ran to Mira Jane's side, and murmured while hugging her arm, I know." Mira Jane waved her hand perfunctorily and then stopped looking at Luo Zhen and Erza. Just when Mira Jane turned his head to leave, Erza suddenly stood up and shouted angrily at Mira Jane's back. "Luo Zhen is very strong. You're not allowed to look down on Luo Zhen." Mira Jane turned her head and looked at Erza with her hands on her waist. A smile appeared on her face. "Really, but I'm the strongest in this guild." Looking at Mira Jane with contemptuous eyes in front of him, Erza was furious. "Luo Zhen is the strongest. Hey, little devil. I can't pretend that I didn't hear what you said." With a sullen face, Mira Jane walked towards Erza step by step. Not to be outdone, Erza returned the same glare. At this moment, Luo Zhen held Erza's palm and pulled her back behind him. The terrifying aura emanating from Mira Jane's body already made Erza's legs tremble slightly. Erza, who is still from Common, has no way to deal with the already famous Mira Jane. Chapter 10, Fight Mira Jane. Belonging. The strongest new generation and newcomers in the guild. Everyone in the guild watched curiously, but they didn't come out to stop them. Even the horseman Carlos folded his arms and watched the scene with a smile on his face. "Little ghost, I won't show mercy to your subordinates just because you are a rookie." There was a smile on Mira Jane's face, and she looked at Luo Zhen in front of her with contempt. Although Luo Zhen in front of him looked very bluffing, with a strong body, a head taller than himself. Seeing Mira Jane, who was eager to try, Luo Zhen also had some expectations in his heart. "It's been a long time since I came to this world, and I haven't formally fought against a wizard. Erza, you go aside first. Bring it on." After Erza also stood in the crowd, there was also some anticipation in Luo Zhen's eyes. "Here we come." Little devil. Seeing the scene Luo Zhen was looking forward to, Mira Jane was covered by a magic circle. "Accept the whole body Satan's soul." As the magic circle dissipated, Mira Jane's figure reappeared in Luo Zhen's sight. Like a devil. Now is not the time to be in a daze. Mira Jane gave a soft drink to Luo Zhen, and the figure rushed straight up. The sharp claws grabbed Luo Zhen's arm, but did not kill Luo Zhen. Under the arrogance of knowledge, Mira Jane's actions clearly appeared in Luo Zhen's mind. The moment Mira Jane's figure appeared in front of Luo Zhen clenched his fist and punched straight ahead. The sound of explosions echoed in the empty square. Just as Mira Jane gained a firm footing, Luo Zhen's fist had already appeared in front of her. Mira Jane was startled and quickly put her arms in front of her. The next moment, a sharp pain surged in his arm, and before Mira Jane could even react, his body backed up rapidly behind him. It slammed heavily on the wall in the distance, and a loud bang made the surrounding guild members stay in place. Hey, are you kidding that Mira Jane got blown away? President, where did you find this monster rookie? Mira Jane is not the only one with this level. The noisy voices kept ringing. Luo Zhen's face was calm, and he quietly watched the smoke and dust rising in the distance. But it's not over yet. Mira Jane's wings vibrated, and she rushed out of the smoke in the blink of an eye, and a black magic ball was condensed between her palms. Boom! With a loud noise, the magic ball swept towards Luo Zhen. Hit the bullseye. No, something went wrong. Hurry up and save people. Why doesn't this newcomer avoid it? Seeing that Black's magic ball hit Luo Zhen, the surrounding members suddenly panicked. As companions, they naturally knew the power of Mira Jane's move, but they didn't expect Luo Zhen to take it. Stop it, you guys. Luo Zhen is not as weak as you think. The groom Carlo at the side didn't panic at all and sat calmly by the side, looking at the smoke and dust with a natural expression. The surrounding guild members who wanted to go up to check it all looked at each other and stopped when they saw their guild leader pinching him with his hands. Boom! There was an explosion and suddenly rushed out of the smoke and dust. Everyone didn't see that figure clearly at all. Mira Jane's pupils shrank and she tried to avoid it. The afterimage instantly appeared in front of Mira Jane, and Luo Zhen's calm face appeared in Mira Jane's sight. With a punch, a sonic boom resounded in midair. The next moment, a figure suddenly fell from the sky, hit the ground heavily. The ground shattered, and cracks like spider webs spread across the ground. Just kidding, it's too much. President, stop them quickly. Mila, are you okay? Although the figure falling from the sky was very fast, all the people present were wizards with magic, and they all clearly saw that Mira Jane was being held down by Luo Zhen on the head and fell straight from the air to the ground. The cracks spreading on the ground made everyone worry. At this moment, Carlos Ma couldn't sit still anymore. He quickly jumped off the chair and quickly walked towards the rising smoke. Before the horseman Carlos approached, a tall and strong figure was slowly reflected in the smoke and dust. As Luo Zhen walked out of the smoke and dust, Carlos the groom asked Luo Zhen with a worried expression, "Is Mira Jane okay?" "Should be fine, just passed out." Luo Zhen scratched his head and replied with some hesitation. Ma Karloff rushed into the smoke and dust and saw Mira Jane's eyes rolled white in a huge pit. He had been beaten back to his original form and lost consciousness. Along with the horse Carlo, there's a strong young man. "Alfman, take Mira Jane back and rest. It's nothing serious." Ma Karloff stepped forward to check and found that Mira Jane's body was fine, but he was beaten and lost consciousness under the heavy blow. Other places are some skin trauma. Ma Karloff breathed a sigh of relief, but he was really afraid that Luo Zhen's attack would be unreasonable and he would hit Mira Jane badly. He has also seen Luo Zhen's strength. "Back then, I met a monster in the forest. The huge body made Erza faint from fright. At that time, the horseman Carlos was ready to step forward to suppress the monster, but Luo Zhen made a move one step ahead. The powerful force crushed the monster with a single punch. But the monster's counterattack couldn't hit Luo Zhen's body at all. In that battle, Luo Zhen didn't use any magic at all, simply used the strength of the physical body to kill the monster. After the farce was over, Ma Karloff looked at the relaxed Luo Zhen, feeling a little rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, Luo Zhen has joined Fairy Tail. If this power can be used in the right way, It will definitely make the magic world more peaceful. Okay, Luo Zhen. Erza, where do you want the guild's coat of arms engraved? After the farce was over, Carlos the horse stood on the chair with a serious face, raised his head, and could barely see Luo Zhen's eyes. Stretching out his arm, Luo Zhen pointed to the inside of his right forearm and said, "Just here." Speaking of choosing the color, Carlos the horse gently landed the seal on the inside of Luo Zhen's forearm. A crimson crest appeared on Luo Zhen's skin. Seeing the coat of arms on Luo Zhen's arm, Erza's face turned slightly red. Then he raised his head and said to the horseman Carlos, "I want to engrave it here, and the color should be black." Looking at the direction Erza was pointing at, Carlos showed a smile on his face and kept talking. The children nowadays are really precocious. The place Erza chose was also the inside of the forearm, but it was the other arm chosen by Luo Zhen. Erza squinted with joy as Black's crest appeared on Erza's skin. Chapter 11, Create Home Eyes. Naked Man Pervert. Looking at the guild crest on the inside of his forearm, Luo Zhen couldn't help but smile. A sense of belonging spontaneously emerged in my heart. Because Luo Zhen and Erza have just arrived, and they don't have their own residence in Magnolia yet. Ma Karloff also left 2 dormitories for the two. Because most of the guild's mages have their own place to live, the guild's dormitory has been vacant for a long time. Everywhere has been covered in dust. After tidying up his dormitory, Luo Zhen lay on the single bed with his hands behind his head, opened the virtual panel of the system. By the time he met Carlos the horse, Big Mom's template progress had already increased to 25%. After arriving at the guild, I met many members of the guild. It directly increased the progress to 85%. Just looking at it can completely reproduce the strength template of Big Mom. Lying on the bed, Luo Zhen received all the rewards excitedly, with a flood of memories flooding Luo Zhen's mind. 3-color domineering is enhanced. The ability of Soul Fruit also appeared in Luo Zhen's mind. With the receipt of the rewards, the use and development of the Soul Fruit was completely engraved in Luo Zhen's mind. Luo Zhen opened his eyes, and a faint light flashed in his eyes. Waving his arms lightly in the air, a faint blue light emerged from between Luo Zhen's palms. This is the soul that Luo Zhen extracted from his body. In the original book, Big Mom also used his own soul to create 3 special homies. Prometheus was created by the soul blessing on the flame. Zeus created by the soul blessing above the thundercloud. Napoleon was created with the blessing of the soul on the sharp blade. These 3 special homies are powerful and have been guarding Big Mom's side. Now that he possesses the ability of Soul Fruit, Luo Zhen naturally wants to create his own home eyes. Looking around in this empty dormitory, there is only a single bed, a wardrobe, and a simple desk. Luo Zhen had no choice but to take his soul back into his body and wait for the opportunity to use it again. Big Mom's swordsmanship is also very strong, and these rewards have almost accommodated all of Big Mom's abilities. There are 3 more opportunities for rewards in the future. Luo Zhen is a little unexpected. What else will come next? Luo Zhen's spirit was a little exhausted due to traveling overnight for several days and fighting with Mira Jane for a while today. After a while, he lay on the bed and fell asleep. Under the darkness of night, Erza in the dormitory next door opened his eyes and raised his arms to look at the coat of arms of Black's fairy tale on the inside of his forearm, with a happy smile on his face. Turning his head and glanced at the wall, Erza was very satisfied when he thought that Luo Zhen was just across the wall from him. Close your eyes and soon fall into dreamland. Even after falling asleep, Erza had a smile on his lips. The next day, Luo Zhen found Mr. Carlo, looked at him sincerely, and said, "President, Erza doesn't know magic yet. I hope everyone in the guild can teach Erza." Looking at Luo Zhen with a sincere expression in front of him, Mrs. Carlo fell silent, then raised his head and looked at Luo Zhen and said, "Don't worry, Luo Zhen. I will teach Erza myself." Luo Zhen nodded with gratitude in his eyes. Facing the horse, Carlos bowed slightly, lowered his head, and said, "Thank you, President. Ha ha ha, we are a family." Ma Carlos laughed loudly, raised his right hand and patted Luo Zhen, who was taller than him. In the following days, Luo Zhen left the guild alone to do commissions. Erza soon awakened to magic under the careful teaching of the horseman Carlo. As in the original book, what Erza awakens is still the magic of dressing up. On this day, a white cloud was floating in midair, and a teenager was resting on the cloud with his hands behind his head and his eyes closed. Master, we're going back to the guild soon. At this time, a human-like face suddenly appeared in Yin Duo under the boy, and he spoke to the boy. The young man opened his eyes, and there was a stream of light in the gray-brown eyes. Well, speed up. The boy glanced at the outline of the town, not far away, yawned, and sat up. The speed of the cloud increased, and it turned into a stream of light and rushed towards the town in an instant. After a while, clouds appeared over the town, and Luo Zhen jumped down from the clouds. The white cloud also fell and floated beside Luo Zhen. Yo, Luo Zhen, you're back. Luo Zhen, is the commission going well? Welcome back, Luo Zhen. The people in Magnolia Town are very warm, and they have become acquainted not long after Luo Zhen came here. Seeing everyone greeted him enthusiastically, Luo Zhen waved to everyone with a smile on his face. Everyone, I'll go back to the guild to deliver the commission. Let's talk next time. After bidding farewell to everyone, Luo Zhen strolled down the streets of Magnolia. Soon came to the door of Fairy Tale. Before Luo Zhen could push the door and enter, the guild's door was suddenly knocked open. A wine bottle suddenly hit Luo Zhen's head. Boom! Just when the wine bottle was about to hit Luo Zhen, the white cloud beside him suddenly became pitch black, turning into a dark cloud and floating in front of Luo Zhen. There was a bang, and a bolt of lightning flashed in front of Luo Zhen's eyes. The moment the wine bottle was about to hit Luo Zhen, it was completely shattered by this bolt of lightning. As the explosion sounded, all the noisy people in the guild turned their gazes over. Yo, everyone, who threw this wine bottle? Luo Zhen smiled and waved to everyone in the guild. Seeing the gentle smile on Luo Zhen's face, everyone suddenly felt chill. With a tacit understanding, he stopped and pointed his finger at a black-haired boy not far away. It's Gray. Looking at the scattered people around him, the black-haired boy still hadn't realized what was going on. When did our guild join a pervert? Why don't you wear clothes in broad daylight? The corner of Luo Zhen's mouth twitched, and he looked at the naked man in front of him. When? Hearing the word abnormal from Luo Zhen's mouth, the black-haired boy quickly looked towards his body. His face changed, and he quickly grabbed the clothes from the side and put them on. Chapter 12, Thundercloud Zeus. Life is great. Who do you call a perverted naked man, BD? After getting dressed, the black-haired boy came to Luo Zhen with a dark face and looked up at the boy who was much taller than him, without the slightest fear in his eyes. Yo, is this little devil a newcomer? Seeing the dissatisfied face of the black-haired boy in front of him, Luo Zhen burst out laughing and asked his companions around him. Yeah, right? What about the newcomer who just joined? Luo Zhen, teach this brat a lesson. My name is Gray. I'm not called brat. Gray in front of him was full of dissatisfaction and shouted at Luo Zhen defiantly. I don't have time to fight with you. Luo Zhen rolled his eyes, pushed the black-haired boy aside with his hand, and walked straight into the guild. Oh, Gray, being ignored. Ha. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to swallow this breath. Who can stand this? Seeing this scene, the members of the guild frantically added fuel to the fire, provoking Gray. Damn it, BD. Stop. Being ignored by Luo Zhen, Gray was already annoyed. The words of the companions around him kept getting into his ears, which immediately made Gray's face darken. Pointing at Luo Zhen's back and shouting, Hey, brat. I can't pretend that I didn't hear your words. Luo Zhen didn't look back. He stretched out his hand and waved behind him. When Gray was about to catch up, a sinister voice suddenly sounded above Gray's head. Looking up, I saw a black cloud floating above Gray's head. What is this? Gray's expression changed, and he looked curiously at the black cloud above his head. The members of the guild watched with curiosity when they saw that Black's Yun Duo actually spoke. I am the most loyal servant of my master, Zeus of Thunder. Black's dark cloud descended slowly and landed in front of Gray. Right in front of the dark cloud, a face appeared in everyone's sight. Little ghost, if you apologize for what you said just now, I can still forgive you. Zeus' face was gloomy, his voice was full of fury, and he stared at Gray with a rumbling thunder. Gray felt a little in awe, but still stuck his neck and shouted, "Who needs to apologize? Beat the smelly brat. Let me teach you a good lesson." Zeus was furious, and a rumbling thunder resounded through the sky. "President, don't you stop them?" Luo Zhen leaned lazily on the chair, watched Gray and Zeus playing not far away, yawned and said, "Ha ha, children just like to play around. Let them have fun." Ma Karloff laughed loudly, took a sip of wine from the bottle, and watched the scene in front of him with relish. Ice make, saucer, Gray's right hand turned into a fist and rested on the palm of his left hand. The next moment, a frisbee made of condensed ice crystals appeared beside Gray. The frisbee spun and made a screeching sound. The frisbee rushed out in an instant and swept directly toward Zeus. In an instant, Zeus's body was cut open by the flying disc turned into ice crystals. However, it recovered its form in the blink of an eye and reappeared intact. What happened? Gray's complexion changed. Looking at Zeus, who had nothing wrong with him, he secretly thought that something was wrong. "Zeus, don't go too far." Luo Zhen waved his hand at Zeus and shouted softly, "Good master." Thunder. Zeus' expression was full of anger, and the rumbling thunder echoed in his body. The next moment, a thunderbolt rushed out of Zeus's body, and a loud bang echoed in the guild. Gray couldn't dodge the lightning attack at all, and was directly pierced through. Green smoke was rising all over his body, and he fell straight down with his eyes turned white. Zeus floated in front of Gray, and was stunned when he saw Gray, who was completely unconscious. Turning around, he looked at Luo Zhen, and then at Gray, who fell to the ground and passed out. Why is this kid so irresistible? The farce is over. Send Gray down to rest. Karloff put down the bottle and jumped down to Gray's side. After inspection, Gray only suffered some injuries and was fine. After people took Gray down for a rest, Carlos surrounded Zeus, who was able to speak in front of him. Curiously asked Luo Zhen, "Luo Zhen, what's going on?" The members of the guild are also very curious about why a cloud can speak. Turning back into a white cloud, Zeus, who slowly floated to Luo Zhen's side, squinted his eyes and swept over everyone one by one. He raised his head proudly and glanced away. "Zeus is a home eyes created by my soul, with the ability to control lightning and fly." Poking the soft body of Zeus aside, Luo Zhen explained to everyone with a smile. After getting along for such a long time, everyone also knows Luo Zhen's magic, soul magic, but they never thought that soul magic could create life. Suddenly, a voice came from among the crowd, asked to Luo Zhen, "Is that the soul of other people can also create life?" Luo Zhen nodded and said, "Yes, but I haven't tried it yet at this time." Ma Karloff's face suddenly became serious, and he looked at Luo Zhen seriously and said, "The magic of creating life is a forbidden technique. Life is great. As magicians, we cannot use magic to break this rule." Luo Zhen nodded, but did not answer Mrs. Carlos' words. Looking at the silent Luo Zhen, Mrs. Ma Carlo didn't know what he was thinking. "Luo Zhen, you are back." At this time, a voice full of surprises suddenly came from the door of the guild. A girl in armor stood at the door of the guild. "Yo, Erza!" A smile appeared on Luo Zhen's face, and he waved to Erza in armor. Xiao Ran came to Luo Zhen. Erza smiled and asked Luo Zhen happily, "When did you come back, and when are you going to leave next time?" Seeing the anticipation in Erza's eyes, Luo Zhen shrugged and said, "You should take a rest during this time." "Very good." After receiving Luo Zhen's reply, the surprise in Erza's eyes seemed to overflow. Chapter 13, What the hell is this? Whitebeard template. After reminiscing with Erza, Luo Zhen came to Mr. Carlo and asked Mr. Carlo curiously, "President, before I go out to complete this commission, you said that I have something to tell me after I come back. What do you want to say?" Hearing Luo Zhen's question, Ma Karloff glanced at Luo Zhen, then took a sip of his wine and continued, "You know us class mages, right?" Luo Zhen nodded. He also knew about those S-level commissioners on the second floor, but Mrs. Carlos Mafia didn't allow them to go to the second floor. In another week, our guild will usher in the annual S-Class Mage assessment. You are one of the examiners this time. Ma Carlos gave Luo Zhen a thumbs up and said with a smile, "Since Fairy Tail was founded, you're the only one who has been able to participate in the S-level wizard assessment within less than a year after joining the guild." Really, before Luo Zhen could answer, Erza on the side spoke first, eyes full of surprise. Erza looked at Luo Zhen's eyes. Shindu was filled with admiration. "Besides me, are there any other people participating in the assessment this time?" Luo Zhen was a little curious. There are quite a few powerful people in the guild. "Besides you, there is Lagos's, just the two of you." Carlos Ma sighed and cast his eyes on his companions who had nothing to do with him. When the members of the guild saw Mrs. Carlo looking over, they all looked away and started chatting with their companions. "Huh, these bastards have gone too far during the commissioning process and received too many complaints," Ma Karloff snorted coldly, but then said with a smile, "But let them complain about the council's complaints. We are Fairy Tail." "Oh, President, I love you to death." The members of the guild smiled knowingly and showed Fairy Tail gestures to the short figure of the groom Carlo. After saying goodbye to the groom Carlo, Luo Zhen took Erza back home. After making the first commission and earning the first pot of gold, Luo Zhen took Erza and moved out of the guild's dormitory. "The house I currently live in is a 3-bedroom, 1 living room rented out, and the house is relatively good. It's not too far from the guild, and the surrounding environment is also very good." Back home, Erza changed his armor into home clothes, wore a knee-length dress, hummed, and was busy in the kitchen. Looking at Erza's busy back, Luo Zhen couldn't help but seem to have returned to the small mountain village back then. When Erza was busy, Luo Zhen opened the virtual panel of the system. Unsurprisingly, this last bit of progress was made up after meeting Gray. During these days, Luo Zhen raised the progress to 90% and obtained the sword skills of Big Mom. Although Big Mom's swordsmanship is not very strong, but with the help of the 3 homies, his strength has been raised to another level. Luo Zhen couldn't help but look forward to the last 2 rewards. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining super fertility. Is it fusion? As the system's notification sound echoed in Luo Zhen's mind, the expression on Luo Zhen's face froze instantly. The palm of the hand was in midair, and the whole person was stunned. After a while, Luo Zhen came to his senses, his mind full of question marks. What is super fertility? Luo Zhen's face was dark. Looking at a line of small characters on the soft light curtain in front of him, he couldn't laugh or cry. In the original work of One Piece, the fertility of Big Mom is indeed better than 1. But why can this also be a reward for the system? After a long silence, Luo Zhen sighed deeply. He waved his hand like a rotten man and said, "Forget it. Let's merge." As the streamer poured into his body, Luo Zhen didn't feel any changes in his body at all. With a sigh of relief, Luo Zhen was afraid that the system's reward would turn him into a woman. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully upgrading the Big Mom template and getting a chance to draw a template lottery. Do you want to draw a lottery? As Big Mom's template was completed, the system's prompt sound echoed in my ears again. Without the slightest hesitation, Luo Zhen replied in his mind, "Yes." Luo Zhen's voice fell, and the original turntable appeared in front of Luo Zhen again. It's just that the image of Big Mom on the turntable is grayed out and cannot be selected further. The turntable started to spin, and familiar images flashed across the turntable. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the white beard of the 4 emperors, Edward Newgate template. Ding! Since the host has collected all the Big Mom templates, the white beard template has increased by 10%. Ding! Reward the white beard constitution, whether to merge. The sound of the system kept echoing in Luo Zhen's mind, until finally, the sound of the system stopped, and Luo Zhen merged with Whitebeard's constitution without hesitation. As the muscles all over his body continued to expand, Luo Zhen frowned suddenly. After a while, the muscles in his body began to convulse, and Luo Zhen's deeply frown became more and more wrinkled. Fortunately, the spasm didn't last long and stopped soon. Feeling the power continuously bursting out from the body, Luo Zhen was very satisfied. Although Whitebeard's constitution is very strong, it is still not as good as Big Mom's Iron Man and Strange Power. What Luo Zhen wanted more was Whitebeard's Jinjin fruit. The Whitebeard's constitution can't be called a timely gift. It can only be regarded as the icing on the cake. After merging with Whitebeard's constitution, Luo Zhen's physical strength has been raised to another level. Zeus at the side saw Luo Zhen's frowning, floating beside Luo Zhen, and asked Luo Zhen, "Master, what's wrong with you?" Glancing at the worried Zeus beside him, Luo Zhen smiled and waved his hand and said, "I'm fine." As if knowing Luo Zhen's habits, Zeus floated to Luo Zhen's side and let Luo Zhen lean on him. Luo Zhen propped his cheek with his right hand and fell on Zeus's body. The soft and sticky body made Luo Zhen like to lie on it when he had nothing to do. Time to eat. Not long after, Erza walked out of the kitchen wearing an apron with a bowl of soup in his hand, put it gently on the table, and shouted at Luo Zhen in the living room. Standing up and stretching, Luo Zhen walked to the kitchen and took a deep breath. He gave Erza a thumbs up and said with a smile, "Erza's craftsmanship is still as good as ever." Chapter 14, Three Homies. The Face of the Devil. Erza's craftsmanship is still as good as ever. Being praised by Luo Zhen, Erza's face blushed. She lowered her head and said nothing. The two were sitting at the dining table eating, and Erza pointed to Zeus floating in the midair of the living room not far away and asked, "Does Zeus want to eat? What does he want to eat?" Hearing his name, Zeus turned his head to look at Erza and Luo Zhen at the dining table, grinning, showing a creepy smile. No, Zeus doesn't eat. Looking at the food on the table, Zeus didn't have any desire to eat, so he turned his head and looked out the window. "Forget it, don't worry about him." Seeing Zeus looking out the window eagerly, Luo Zhen rolled his eyes. Been with Zeus for a while. Some time ago, Luo Zhen didn't have any difficulty when he went out to do commissions. So Luo Zhen never created homies. When going out to entrust this time, because it was a bit tricky, Luo Zhen created Zeus. Perhaps it is because Luo Zhen's soul is relatively strong, and the created Zeus is also very powerful. It is very different from Zeus in the original book. After eating, Luo Zhen sat on the sofa in the living room, looking at Zeus floating beside him thoughtfully. Now that Zeus has been created, let's simply create the remaining two homies in the original book. Just do it and stretch out your right hand. A faint blue floating light emerged in Luo Zhen's palm. Coming to the kitchen, Erza looked suspiciously at Luo Zhen, who walked into the kitchen and was about to ask something. Seeing Luo Zhen turn on the gas stove on the side, the flames ignited. Luo Zhen stretched out his blue floating palm into the flames. Erza hurriedly opened his mouth to stop him. "Wait, Luo Zhen, what are you doing?" "It's okay, don't worry." Turning his head and showing a gentle smile to Erza, Luo Zhen didn't feel any burning sensation as he stretched his palm into the flames. The floating light dissipated in Luo Zhen's hands and was absorbed by the flames in an instant. Withdrawing his palm, the flames on the gas stove began to surge. The rising flames made Erza on the side completely unaware of what was going on. The next moment, a voice came from within the flames. "Master, please give me a name. I will serve you forever." In the flames, a human-like face suddenly appeared. The flame left the gas stove and slowly floated in front of Luo Zhen, lowering his eyes, and his deep voice echoed in their ears. "Then, your name is Prometheus." Luo Zhen didn't bother to name him, so he named him with a name in the original work of One Piece. "Thank you, my master. Prometheus will never forget your kindness." The flames were raging, and Prometheus, who lowered his eyes, murmured. Pulling out part of his soul, Luo Zhen felt a little weak in spirit. Zeus in the living room heard names that did not belong to Luo Zhen and Erza, and drifted towards the kitchen curiously. Seeing a guy covered in flames, Zeus suddenly understood something. With a proud expression, he said to Prometheus, "Boy, I am your senior. I only obey my master." Prometheus glanced at Zeus. Then his eyes fell on Luo Zhen. UBD. Zeus was furious for a while, but after being glanced at by Luo Zhen, he immediately calmed down. He secretly glared at Prometheus in front of him. Luo Zhen, are you okay? Erza was very curious to see a new life being created. But seeing that Luo Zhen's complexion was a little pale, he felt worried immediately and asked Luo Zhen quickly. Shaking his head, Luo Zhen said with a smile, I'm fine, don't worry. Although Luo Zhen said so, the worry in Erza's eyes remained. There is also a knife, but Luo Zhen doesn't want the one from Big Mom in the original book. After searching at home for a long time, but did not find a suitable weapon, I gave up this idea for the time being. I plan to wait 2 days to find a blacksmith in Magnolia to forge a weapon of my own. Luo Zhen, there's still a few days until the S-rank wizard assessment. Are you nervous? After washing the dishes, Erza sat beside Luo Zhen and asked Luo Zhen curiously. Smiling, Luo Zhen said indifferently, it doesn't matter if you can become an S-level wizard or not. Shrugging his shoulders, thinking of Lagosas, Luo Zhen said indifferently. And this time the participants are only me and Lagosas, so I don't think it's a big problem. Although possessing Thunder Dragon Slayer magic, it can restrain Zeus on the side. But Luo Zhen's own strength is not weak, and it doesn't mean that he can't fight without relying on Home Eyes. Only Home Eyes, who has defeated Luo Zhen, is eligible to meet Luo Zhen. The next day, Luo Zhen found the blacksmith in the town. Let him forge a long knife according to his own ideas. Knowing Luo Zhen's thoughts, the blacksmith said that it was not difficult at all. 2 days later, Luo Zhen retrieved his long knife. This was forged by Luo Zhen according to the horizontal knife in the memory of his previous life. The blade is straight, and the blade presents a touch of black. Luo Zhen, who returned home, immediately attached his soul to the horizontal knife. After a while, a big ferocious mouth and a pair of eyes suddenly appeared on the knife body. Owner Hung Dao, who had life, was as light as a feather in Luo Zhen's hands. The moment he opened his eyes, Hung Dao's eyes became extremely respectful. From now on, your name will be Napoleon. Similarly, the name of Hung Dao is still named after the name in the original work. At this point, Luo Zhen's 3 major homies can be considered complete. Although the same name, the same attributes. But there's a big difference from Home Eyes and Big Mom in the original book, no matter in terms of image or strength. Although Lei Zeus usually looks like White Cloud, his face is even more ferocious. The biggest difference is Prometheus. In the original One Piece, Prometheus usually looks like a little sun. But the Prometheus created by Luo Zhen is like a flame monster. The turbulent flames have always been preserved, showing a ferocious face in the flames. As for Napoleon, even the prototype is different, not the same weapon at all. Chapter 15, the assessment begins. If I don't come out, I'll leave. Soon, the day of the S-level assessment will arrive. On this day, Ma Karloff came to the guild. Looking at the expectant people in the guild with a smile on his face, he shouted loudly to everyone in the guild. This year's S-Class Mage assessment begins now. As the horse Carlo's voice fell, everyone present roared in unison. Luo Zhen D. Cassis, Lager thus Dreyer. Ma Karloff called the names of the two, and Luo Zhen and Legerses walked out of the crowd together. Glancing at Luo Zhen provocatively, Legerses walked up to the horseman Carlo with high spirits. He said with a serious and proud face, Old man, I will prove to you that I am the strongest in this guild. While speaking, there were bursts of thunder flashing on his body. Luo Zhen also stepped out of the crowd beside Luo Zhen. Surrounded by Zeus and Prometheus, a long knife in a sheath is pinned to his waist. Every year in the S-level assessment, you can choose one person to be your companion, and you can also choose one person. His eyes swept over Luo Zhen and Legerses. Ma Karloff said seriously. Scanning the crowd, Legerses didn't hesitate at all and directly chose Freed, who also joined the guild not long ago but was very strong. After joining Fairy Tail, Freed admired Lagerus very much and even joined Lagerthus' team with 2 others. It's called Thor and Freed is the captain, and also one of the men recognized by Lagursis. After Lagursis made his choice, Luo Zhen chose Erza without any hesitation. Erza hesitated and said to Luo Zhen, "My strength is still too weak. Will hold you back." Seeing the hesitant Erza, Luo Zhen said directly, "Your strength is very strong, but you haven't discovered it yet. You will definitely become an S-level mage in the future, and you will be on your own." Seeing Luo Zhen's serious eyes, Erza nodded heavily. "I will not let you down." Firm eyes appeared in Erza's eyes, and at the same time, the seeds of becoming an S-class mage gradually germinated in Erza's heart. Okay, then let's go to the assessment site. Seeing that the two had chosen their partners, Karloff nodded and walked out of the guild with his hands behind his back. Luo Zhen and Lagursis followed behind the stable Carlo, and behind them were Erza and Fried respectively. On the train to a seaside town, he boarded another boat and sailed slowly towards his destination. Because of Dragon Slayer, Lagursis' face has become very ugly since he was on the road. Fortunately, the journey was not very far, and it didn't take long before they came to a small island. Looking at the small island, Carlos Ma turned around, looked at the two with a serious face, and said, "There are 3 roads on this small island. One is a dead end and has no end, and the other 2 roads have 10 branches. Flags. You have to collect these 10 flags and bring them to the finish line. There will be someone waiting for you. Then now, let's go." Carlos waved his hand. Luo Zhen jumped up on the boat, pulled Erza, and jumped on his Zeus's back. With a sinister smile on his face, Zeus glanced at the 2 ugly-looking Lagursis with disdain. In an instant, it turned into an afterimage and rushed straight to the island. Snort. Looking at the back of Luo Zhen leaving, Lagursis snorted coldly. Fried beside him gestured with his fingers in the air. The next moment, a pair of wings appeared on the backs of the 2 at the same time. With a shake of their wings, the 2 also galloped towards the island. Luo Zhen, who landed on the island 1 step ahead, looked at the 3 roads in front of him. As soon as the knowledge color domineering is opened, it directly covers the entire island. Not long after, Luo Zhen stepped into a cave with Erza. Stepping into the cave, a red flag, not far away, caught Erza's attention. When Erza was about to step forward to take down the flag, Luo Zhen suddenly stretched out his hand to stop Erza. He glanced at Luo Zhen with some doubts. Erza was about to say something. Luo Zhen waved to Zeus, who was on the side, and Zeus rushed towards the flag excitedly. The moment he entered the range of the flag, countless arrows rained down from the sky, piercing Zeus's body continuously. But soon Zeus's body returned to normal. "How do you know?" Erza showed surprise on his face, looked at Luo Zhen in disbelief, and asked. Luo Zhen spread his hands helplessly and said with a smile, "How could the president let us pass the assessment so easily?" Hearing Luo Zhen's words, Erza was a little embarrassed, lowered his head, and dared not speak. The 2 continued on, and it didn't take long to collect 7 flags. When he encountered the 8th flag, Zeus was about to pull it out. Suddenly, the cave shook. The next moment, a huge monster appeared from the ground, and Zeus was startled by its ferocious face. Damn it, guys. The color of his body slowly turned black, and Zeus showed anger, and thunder surged on his body. "Go to hell." Following Zeus's roar, an explosion echoed in the cave. After the thunder, the monster was instantly smashed into ashes. Seeing that the monster completely lost its vitality, Zeus was still a little bit puzzled. "Okay, let's go." Looking helplessly at Zeus, who kept summoning thunderbolts to attack the corpse of the monster, Luo Zhen pulled his body and walked towards the depths of the cave. As expected, the next flag was again guarded by a monster. But this time, Zeus was not given a chance to play. The figure of Prometheus, who looked like a demon from hell, rushed forward, and the raging flames completely engulfed the monster. Accompanied by the screams of the monster, after the flames dissipated, there were only ashes all over the ground. Only the last flag was missing, and the 2 continued to move forward. After a while, they came to a huge cave. Not far from the cave, a red flag is planted there. Erza glanced around vigilantly, but didn't seem to see any monsters. "I'm going to get the flag." Erza, who had never had a chance to express himself, saw that the surroundings were very quiet and proposed to Luo Zhen, who was beside him. Shaking his head, Luo Zhen didn't answer Erza's words. He shouted to a dark corner not far away, "Come out. If you don't come out, we have to leave." Erza was startled and quickly looked towards the corner. Ah, the current rookies are all so strong. Chapter 16, Fight the Guildarts. Don't fight, don't fight. Oh, the rookies these days are all monsters. In the empty cave, a voice of vicissitudes echoed in the cave. Following the sound of this voice, a figure slowly walked out of the dark corner. I saw this figure folded his hands on his chest with a half smile on his face, and he didn't care that he had been discovered. "You are the examiner?" Frowning, looking at the figure in front of him, Luo Zhen said in surprise. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Guildarts, a fairy tales level mage. I'm a guardian of the 10th flag. If you want to get the 10th flag from me, you must first let me admit you." Nodding his head, the middle-aged man pointed to the red flag not far away and said with a smile. Luo Zhen nodded slightly. The next moment, Luo Zhen's figure instantly disappeared from Guildart's sight, turning into an afterimage and rushing towards the red flag. Frowning, Guildarts disappeared, and the moment Luo Zhen appeared in front of the flag, he raised his fist and smashed Luo Zhen's back. Knowing that it would be uncomfortable to take this punch forcefully, Luo Zhen didn't dare to hold on. He dodged and fled from the vicinity of the flag, looking at Guildarts with serious eyes. Hey, young people can't be so lacking in martial arts." Looking at the solemn Luo Zhen, Guildarts felt helpless. It never occurred to him that Luo Zhen's first thought was to take the flag and run away first. Shrugging, Luo Zhen didn't think there was anything wrong with what he did. Helplessly said, "Uncle, I can't beat you, so I have no choice but to do this." Guildart smiled and said to Luo Zhen, "There's one more thing I forgot to tell you. Even if you take off the flag, it's useless before I admit you. It will be invalid." Looking at Guildart's confident smile, Luo Zhen also knew that this battle was inevitable. Sighing, his eyes sharpened instantly. "Then come on." Drinking lightly, Luo Zhen stared at Guildarts with vigilance in his eyes. Guildarts adhered to the concept of his predecessors. With one hand behind his back, he stretched out his right hand and hooked Luo Zhen's palm. Boom! The sound of the explosion echoed in the empty cave, and the stones under Luo Zhen's feet burst instantly, spreading like a spider web. Luo Zhen, who appeared in front of Guildarts in an instant, clenched his fists and punched Guildarts directly in the face. Guildarts reached out to block, fist bumping on the arm. Guildarts' expression darkened involuntarily. He shook his arm and looked at Luo Zhen in surprise. "Such a strong force. Uncle, you have to be serious." Grinning, a raging flame and a dark cloud appeared behind Luo Zhen. Thunder and lightning roared, flames roared. Thunder continued to bombard, blasting towards Guildart's figure. Prometheus kept spitting out fireballs, and the scorching heat swept over, quickly turning the entire cave into a sea of flames. Luo Zhen pulled out Napoleon from his waist. The jet-black blade shone brightly under the light of the fire. He raised his sword and fought with Guildarts hand-to-hand. During the fight, Guildarts became more and more surprised. This young man seemed to be able to predict every attack he would make, and every time he could dodge his attack without any risk, and seize the gap between your own attacks to fight back. Suddenly, Guildarts suddenly felt dizzy and his movements froze slightly. At this moment's pause, Luo Zhen directly cut out a sword. The fierce sword energy instantly chopped towards Guildart's neck. Relieved, Guildart's complexion darkened due to the sword aura so close at hand. His eyes also became serious. With a wave of his right hand towards the front, the sword energy that was close at hand shattered instantly. It turned into streaks of fragmented sword energy and shot towards the surroundings. The sword energy blasted on the surrounding stone walls, making a huge roar. The smoke and dust dissipated, and the stone wall was covered with dense slashes. Prometheus and Zeus floating beside Luo Zhen slowly descended and their ferocious faces appeared in Gildart's sight. He reached out and grabbed Prometheus beside him and attached it to Napoleon in his hand. In an instant, the blade became extremely narrow and long. Emperor's sword, broken blade. Luo Zhen jumped up and stood on the body of Zeus and rose in the air. Surrounded by incomparable flames, Napoleon in his hand slashed out with a sword. Slashed a sword with raging flames, and the scorching heat swept over. With a shocking explosion, Gildarts stepped out from the smoke. The clothes on his body were a little torn, and his eyes were very excited. Looking at Luo Zhen, he muttered to himself, "President, you really summoned a monster this time." As he spoke, he rushed straight to Luo Zhen, completely ignoring the oncoming flames and thunder. At Luo Zhen's feet, Gildarts jumped up and rushed straight to Luo Zhen. Crush! Appearing in front of Luo Zhen, Gildart's palm suddenly touched Zeus's body. Boom! With a bang, Zeus under Luo Zhen's feet suddenly exploded. It turned into countless small dark clouds scattered around. Luo Zhen fell to the sky and became serious when he saw the countless Zeus. Have you finally used magic? My magic is super magic, shattering magic, capable of shattering everything I touch, including humans. Gildarts raised his arm and smiled at Luo Zhen. Is that why you told me your details? Putting away the long knife, Luo Zhen asked Gildarts with a smile. After waving his hands, Gildarts said indifferently, "I've already admitted you. Go and get the flag." Looking at Gildarts, who suddenly stopped fighting, Luo Zhen was a little surprised for a while. But seeing Gildart's half-smile look, Luo Zhen felt that things were not that simple. Sure enough, the moment Luo Zhen was about to take off the flag, a thunderbolt blasted not far away in an instant and exploded directly beside Luo Zhen. At the moment when the thunder and lightning struck Luo Zhen, the dark cloud that split into countless small Zeus gathered and blocked Luo Zhen. Swallow this thunder in one gulp. Bursts of blue smoke spewed out of his mouth, and he stared fiercely at the place where the thunder came from. Hey, you little brat is playing tricks like this, aren't you? Chapter 17, Fighting Legosis. Not only you can eat. Hey, you little brat, do you know how to do this sneak attack? Zeus' ferocious face was full of anger. His white body became as black as ink, and traces of lightning flashed in Zeus' body. Inti's voice echoed in the empty cave. Not far away, Prometheus also floated in front of Luo Zhen, and the raging flames soared into the sky, like the cheeks of the devil in hell emerging from the flames. Put down the flag. The figures of Lajerthas and Freed walked out of a hole not far away. Lajerthas, who was wearing a coat, didn't pay attention to Zeus and Prometheus at all, and stared at Luo Zhen with his eyes. Luo Zhen stood up and pulled Prometheus and Zeus in front of him to the sides. "Master, leave this guy to us." Pulled aside by Luo Zhen, Zeus said with anger in his voice, staring at Legasis viciously. Luo Zhen didn't speak, with a faint smile on his cheek. The next moment, Luo Zhen's figure instantly appeared in front of Lajerthas. The clenched fist punched out and went straight to Lajerthas' face. Accompanied by a loud noise, Lajerthas' figure flew upside down and slammed heavily on the wall behind him. "We're even." Glancing at Freed at the side, Luo Zhen rubbed his wrist and said calmly. After speaking, Luo Zhen turned around and walked toward the flag. A hole. Thunder surged on the shattered stone wall, and Lajerthas rushed out of the pile of rubble. There was a red fist mark on his face, and the somewhat embarrassed look made Gildarts, who was not far away, wanted to laugh. Gildarts crossed his arms and sat in a corner watching the scene. When he fought against Luo Zhen, he knew that Lajerthas could not be Luo Zhen's opponent. "Leave it to the three of you." He pulled out the long knife at his waist and threw it into the air. Suddenly, a human face appeared on the sharp blade. "Yes, my master." With a ferocious smile, the flaming Prometheus floated in the air. Fire from the sky. Bursts of flames sprayed out from the mouth, blasting towards Lajerthas and Freed. Zeus was not idle either. His pitch-black body was floating in the air. The thunder kept pouring down, and the moment the fireball hit the ground, it exploded, The figures of Lajerthas and Freed dodged, constantly avoiding the attacks of Zeus and Prometheus in the air. The next moment, a blade of light flashed in front of Lajerthas' eyes, and it slashed straight at Lajerthas' chest. Not good. The expression of Freed in the distance changed, and his fingers gestured in the air in front of him. Steel. The next moment, a piece of steel suddenly appeared in front of Lajerthas, blocking Napoleon's slash. The steel was cut in two, and the slashes that still had power continued to attack Lajerthas. But Lajerthas, who was already prepared, easily avoided the attack. Napoleon gave Freed a vicious look, turned his head, and killed Freed. Napoleon, give me this opponent. At this time, Erza stood out in armor and stood in front of Napoleon. Looking sharply at Freed in front of him, he held a long sword and said, looking at Luo Zhen in the distance. After seeing Luo Zhen nodding, Napoleon continued to hide, waiting for the opportunity to give Lajerthas a fatal blow. Damn it, you just let these things hold me back. Don't you dare to confront me head-on. Constantly dodging the attacks of Zeus and Prometheus, Lajerthas felt annoyed. He roared at Luo Zhen, who was sitting next to the flag in the distance. Although it can devour Zeus's thunder, his attack is completely ineffective against Zeus and Prometheus. He also tried to fight back, but the attack had no effect on them at all. In this world, there is no armed, domineering, and yellow spring fruit. Except for those who use soul magic, there are very few people who can deal with home ice. Luo Zhen crossed his arms and looked at the fleeing Lajerthas with great interest. He chuckled and said, if you can't even pass them, what qualifications do you have to be my opponent? Damn it. Hearing Luo Zhen's flat voice beside his ear, Lajerthas felt annoyed in his heart. The roar of the thunder dragon. With a sudden break, he stopped abruptly, and Lajerthas put his right hand on ground. There is thunder in his mouth. The next moment, a breath full of lightning spewed out of Lajerthas' mouth, directly attacking Zeus and Prometheus in the air. Zeus' body swelled in midair, and he opened his mouth wide to swallow the gushing thunder. Lajerthas' complexion was dark. Looking at Zeus, who had received his breath without mistake, he was constantly thinking about countermeasures in his mind. Unexpectedly, Zeus could also eat his own lightning. Zeus' body was created from a real thundercloud, and its power was unimaginable. Chocule. Zeus' body swelled enormously, and rumbling thunder continued to roar in his body. Accompanied by a loud explosion, a thunderbolt as thick as a bucket descended from the sky, blasting towards Lajerthas in an instant. BD, don't underestimate me. With anger on his face, Lajerthas stomped on the ground and jumped straight up. He grabbed the bucket-thick thunderbolt with both hands and stuffed it into his mouth. You are not the only one who eats lightning. Lajerthas roared angrily, swallowing this bolt of thunder into his stomach. A grin appeared on his face. Full strength is back. Stupid. Let me do it. Prometheus on the side saw this scene and knew that Zeus could not fight Lajerthas. Stepping forward to squeeze Zeus' body away, the flames on his body became more and more turbulent. Stolen fire. Prometheus rushed forward, and a flash of fire streaked across the sky. Under the extremely fast dive, Prometheus' body turned into a pillar of fire, rushing towards Lajerthas. Thunder Dragon's collapsing fist. Unavoidable, Lajerthas gathered lightning on his fist, ready to head with Prometheus. When the pillar of fire collided with the thunder, Lajerthas' figure stepped back a few steps. Prometheus flew upside down and hit Luo Zhen's side heavily. Prometheus was frightened and angry, and the flames on his body became more violent. Zeus, Napoleon, come back too. Seeing that Prometheus was about to step forward after being repelled, Luo Zhen stretched out his hand to stop him. At the same time, he yelled at Zeus, who kept sending down thunder, and Napoleon, who was hiding. Hearing Luo Zhen's voice, Zeus gave Lajerthas a fierce look, and then returned to Luo Zhen unwillingly. Chapter 18 passed the assessment. Ma Carlos bad taste. You are finally willing to make a move. Seeing Luo Zhen drink away Zeus and Prometheus, Lajerthas' eyes were full of fighting spirit, and the lightning flashed on Lajerthas' body. The two fists collided, and a flash of thunder roared between the fists. Luo Zhen smiled, completely ignoring the high-spirited Lagoses. Suddenly, Luo Zhen's complexion became calm. Accompanied by the violent explosion, Lagurce's pupils shrank sharply. Luo Zhen's figure disappeared directly from his sight. Not far away, Gildart shook his head and said boringly, it's over, go home." Standing up and stretching, he no longer watched the outcome of this battle. The figure of Lagurce's quickly retreated to the corner of the stone wall, scanning the surroundings vigilantly, trying to find the figure of Luo Zhen. The next moment, Luo Zhen appeared in front of Lagurce's. Lagurce's pupils constricted violently, and he wanted to raise his arms and put them on himself. Too late. A calm voice echoed in my ears. A sharp pain appeared in the stomach along with the sound. Luo Zhen clenched his fist and punched Lagurce's heavily in the stomach. The violent impact directly shattered the stone wall behind him. Lagurce's rolled his eyes white and collapsed on the ground powerlessly. Not far away, Erza was struggling to fend off Fried's attack. Erza, who has awakened to magic for less than half a year now, is no match for Fried at all. The violent explosion echoed in the cave. Fried glanced this way and saw Lagurce on the ground rolling his eyes. Fried was startled and shouted at the figure of Lagurce lying on the ground. "Lagurce, are you okay? Stop screaming. He's passed out and won't wake up." Scratching his head, Luo Zhen yawned. Watching Erza's battle between the two of them was difficult to tell the winner for a while. Although Fried was able to fight against Erza, but because of the defeat of Lagurce's, Fried could not calm down and fight Erza seriously. "Okay, let's all stop. You lose." Just when Erza was sent flying by Fried, Luo Zhen stood up, came to Fried, and said calmly, looking at Lagurce, who fell to the ground and passed out completely. Although Fried was not reconciled, he also silently accepted the consequences. Facing Luo Zhen, he bowed slightly, and then passed by Luo Zhen's side, helping the fainted Lagoses to walk out of the cave. Looking at the backs of the two leaving, Luo Zhen asked Erza, who was out of breath, "Are you all right?" Erza shook his head and said in a depressed mood, "I'm not his opponent." "How long have you learned to use magic?" "You will definitely be very strong in the future." Luo Zhen stretched out his palm and rubbed Erza's little head, took off the 10th flag, and moved on. Since Gildarts didn't tell himself that the assessment was over, it meant that there was still an assessment ahead. Sitting on the back of Zeus, he quickly interspersed in the cave. A light appeared in the distance, and Zeus turned to Luo Zhen and said, "Master, there is an exit ahead." Luo Zhen raised his head, looked at the approaching light, and sat up straight. The figure of Zeus rushed out, and there was a vast ocean outside. Came directly to the back of the island. This exit is connected to a cliff. The moment Zeus rushed out of the cave, there was a loud, rumbling sound above his head. He turned his head and looked behind him. I saw pieces of rubble falling over the entrance of the cave, completely blocking the entrance of the cave. Luo Zhen was also a little confused for a while. What was the final assessment? At this time, Erza suddenly pointed to the collapsed stone pile and shouted, "Look, what's there?" Look in the direction Erza is pointing. There's a note on top of the stone. I saw that it was written on the note, "Luo Zhen, you should have come to the end." So now the final assessment begins. The final assessment is to return to Magnolia from here. We have already taken a step ahead. Let's go. At the end of the note, Carlos the horse deliberately left a mischievous smile on his face. Luo Zhen's face darkened. Looking at the note in his hand, he couldn't laugh or cry. Looking at the text on the note, Erza didn't react for a while and asked Luo Zhen, "What does the president mean? Did he leave us?" Shrugging, Luo Zhen said helplessly, "The assessment is over. We passed." This final assessment is actually a bad taste of the horseman Carlos. No matter who the final passer is, Carlos must have left long ago. After thinking about it, Luo Zhen said to Zeus below him, "Let's go back to the place where we went to the island before." After getting the order, Zeus immediately said loudly, "Understood, master." As he said that, he speeded up and rushed straight to the place on the island. Sure enough, the boat that Carlos had sent them to had already left. Where they came to the island, a small boat stayed there. On the boat, Lajerthas and Freed, who had already woken up, looked at the boat with puzzled faces. Especially Lagerthus, who looked at the ship in front of him with a dark face. "Hey, do you want to ride?" Asking Zeus to stop, Luo Zhen sat cross-legged on Zeus's body and shouted at Legasis and Freed on the beach. Looking up at Zeus in the sky, Lajersus snorted coldly, and Tsundere turned his head. Lajersus, let's go back with them. Seeing Legosis Tsundere turn his head away, Freed hastily persuaded him from the sidelines. After struggling for a while, Lajersus finally compromised. Let the reluctant Zeus descend and stop on the sand. Just when the two of Lajersus were about to step on Zeus, Luo Zhen suddenly said to Lajersus, "I can give you a ride, but I have one condition." Hearing this, Lajersus suddenly became furious and shouted to Luo Zhen, "Don't think that I can't go back without you. I won't sit down." As he spoke, he turned to get on the boat. Freed quickly persuaded Lajersus. Because of the fight with Luo Zhen, Lajersus' body was already injured. Coupled with being a dragon slayer, it is difficult for Lajersus to adapt to transportation. "Tell me, what are the conditions?" With a dark face, under Freed's persuasion, Lajersus asked Luo Zhen reluctantly. "It's not an excessive request, but when you are in the guild, you can feed Zeus some lightning when you have time." Luo Zhen grinned and pointed to Zeus below him. Chapter 19, S-Class Mage. You'll be a good wife. It's not an excessive condition. Usually when you're in the guild, just feed this guy some lightning. Luo Zhen grinned, pointed to Zeus under him, and said, That's it." Hearing Luo Zhen's request, Lajersus was stunned. It's not that the conditions proposed by Luo Zhen are excessive. On the contrary, they're a bit too simple. "That's it." Luo Zhen nodded and looked at Lajersus with a chuckle. After a moment of silence, Lajersus nodded and agreed. "That's all right. Let's go." Giving room to Lajerthas and Freed, Zeus reluctantly took the four of them home. Zeus was very fast, and it didn't take long to return to Magnolia. When they came to the gate of the guild, Lajersus and Freed jumped down and pushed open the gate of the guild in embarrassment. In the guild, Carlos the horse smiled, and when he saw Lajersus walking in, the smile on his face froze immediately. Looking at the figure of Lajersus, Mak Karloff stood up straight and asked Lajersus curiously, "Lajersus, did you pass the test?" Logically speaking, it shouldn't be. He knew the strength of Lajersus best, and it was impossible for him to pass the examination under Luo Zhen's hands. Lajersus shook his head, pointed to Luo Zhen who walked in from the door, and said this guy passed. Seeing that there was no sign of resignation on Lajersus' face, Carlos the horse nodded in satisfaction. Being able to accept failure is also a good thing. The eyes of everyone in the guild fell on Luo Zhen, and following Carlo the horseman strode up to Luo Zhen. Loudly announced, "Starting today, Luo Zhendai Cassis has become another S-rank mage in our fairy tale." "Oh, congratulations, Luo Zhen." "I knew that Luo Zhen must have passed the examination. Great Luo Zhen." As the horse Carlo's voice fell, everyone in the guild cheered. The shouts of the crowd resounded through the sky. Seeing Carlo the groom standing in front of him and the lazy guildarts on the bar not far away, Luo Zhen also had a smile on his face. "Luo Zhen, congratulations." Standing in front of Luo Zhen, Ma Carlos had a smile on his face and said with a smile on his loving face, "President, I will carry the title of fairy tale on my back, and I will not disappoint this coat of arms." Raising his arm, pointing to the emblem of fairy tale on the inside of his forearm, Luo Zhen said with a serious expression, "Fairy tale's name and whatnot, go to him. Look for your respective paths and move forward. This is fairy tale. Come on, let's become S-rank mages for Luo Zhen. Come to the banquet." Ma Karloff cheered and shouted to everyone in the guild, "Oh, the banquet is on. Come on, Luo Zhen. Let's play together." Being pulled into the crowd, Luo Zhen had a rare indulgence. At night, Luo Zhen shook his dizzy head. Erza helped Luo Zhen walk towards home. Seeing that Luo Zhen's face was a little ugly, Erza couldn't help but complain to Luo Zhen, "Really, you are obviously not yet an adult. How can you drink?" Our Erza is really becoming more and more like a good wife. Erza's complaining words echoed in his ears, and the corners of Luo Zhen's mouth couldn't help but twitch. After Luo Zhen's voice fell, Erza suddenly fell silent. With his head down, he supported Luo Zhen and walked towards home. Where Luo Zhen couldn't see, Erza's face was flushed and his eyes were full of confusion. Back home, Erza ran out after sending Luo Zhen back to the room. Seeing the back of Erza disappearing in the blink of an eye, Luo Zhen couldn't help shaking his head and chuckling. Spring goes and autumn comes, and 2 years are fleeting. In the second year after Luo Zhen became an S-level mage, Legersis passed the S-level mage assessment and became an S-level mage. During the 2 years, Luo Zhen also met many characters that appeared in the original novel. Although most of them are supporting roles, the template of Whitebeard has been increased to 50%, and the ability of shaking fruit has been obtained. On this day, Luo Zhen was lying on Zeus' body, floating gently in the air. Soon, the silhouette of Magnolia appeared in front of her. "Master, we'll be at the guild soon." With the breeze caressing his face, Zeus spoke softly to Luo Zhen on his back. Luo Zhen put his hands behind his head. The gentle sunlight shone on Luo Zhen's body. He lazily opened his eyes and closed them again because of some dazzling eyes. Standing at the door of the guild, even if the door is not opened, the noisy voice has already reached the ears. "Really? I haven't been back for so long. Why is it still like this?" Reluctantly pushing open the door, there was another noisy scene in the guild. "Yo, hello everyone." Luo Zhen, who pushed open the door, smiled and waved to everyone who stopped. The sound of the door being pushed open caught the attention of everyone in the guild. Looking at the familiar yet somewhat unfamiliar figure, everyone immediately cheered. "Luo Zhen, you're back. Welcome home." Luo Zhen and Zeus, Prometheus, Napoleon, welcome home. Seeing Luo Zhen's taller figure, everyone rushed forward and gathered around Luo Zhen, asking Luo Zhen how this mission is going. "Stop." Seeing that everyone was surrounding him, Luo Zhen quickly stretched out his hand to stop everyone from asking. Wiping the sweat off his forehead, he smiled at everyone and said, "Is the president in the guild? I'll report the details of the commission to the president first, and then I'll catch up with everyone." The president was summoned by the Senate again. It seems that it is because of Luo Zhen. Hearing that Luo Zhen wanted to find the president, Gray, who was standing aside, said with a snicker, "Huh, my business." Luo Zhen scratched his head, but didn't realize what happened to him. "It's not that you went too far in the commissioning process and smashed a mountain to pieces." Seeing the puzzled look on Luo Zhen's face, Gray immediately shouted at Luo Zhen. Spreading his hands helplessly, Luo Zhen said, "But that monster is too big. I couldn't control the strength, and even the mountain and the monster were shattered together." As expected of Luo Zhen, destroying a mountain is as easy as kicking over a small mound. Too strong, Luo Zhen. "I've decided. I'm going to target Luo Zhen." "Forget it. Thank God if you could be half as strong as Luo Zhen." Chapter 20. Go to his council. "Are you new?" Luo Zhen found a seat at the bar and sat down, and the members of the guild gathered around Luo Zhen, listening to some things that Luo Zhen encountered in the commission. Looking at the curious eyes of everyone, Luo Zhen did not hesitate to tell his own story and shared with them some interesting things he encountered in the commission. I don't know how long it has passed. Carlos the horse returned to the guild. Seeing the guild members gathered around the bar one after another, he was a little puzzled. How could as a whole Carlo not know about these people in his own guild? They have to quarrel in the guild every day, and the only one who can calm him down is Erza. Curiously, he squeezed into the crowd and immediately saw Luo Zhen sitting on the bar counter and telling stories vividly. As soon as he saw Luo Zhen, Mrs. Carlo became angry. Squeezing into the crowd and jumping onto the bar, Mrs. Carlos yelled at Luo Zhen and asked, "You brat, why did you make such a big commotion during the entrustment again?" Raising his head to glance at the groom Carlo, Luo Zhen stood up with a smile and put down the wine bottle in his hand. Putting his hands under the horse's ribs, he picked him up. It's the president. Long time no see. I miss you so much." Being hugged by Luo Zhen with his hands under his ribs and held up over his head, the stable Carlo was instantly annoyed. shouting at Luo Zhen. "You brat, show me some respect. I'm the president." As he said that, he was about to reach out and beat Luo Zhen's head, but he couldn't touch Luo Zhen because of his short hands. His face flushed red with anger. Luo Zhen had had enough of seeing the flailing Mr. Carlo. He put on the bar and asked Mr. Carlo, "President, I haven't seen you for so long. Why are you yelling as soon as we meet?" It was agreed to be a family in our guild who would yell at the long-lost family when they meet. Obviously, it was Luo Zhen's own fault, but a burst of words came out, leaving Mrs. Carlo speechless. "That's right, President. Why are you like this?" "President, you are wrong. It can't be like this in the future." The words of the surrounding guild members kept getting into the ears of Carlo the horse, making Carlo the horse flushed. Not because of shyness, but because of anger. "You bastards, don't think that you have nothing to do. These are all complaints from the council, all because of you." Ma Carlos was furious, and he took out a thick stack of papers from his arms and yelled at everyone, "Go away. It's gone. Let's do a commission." Seeing that Mrs. Carlo was angry and that he and others were about to get angry, everyone turned their heads and left. Talked and laughed with the companions around me and left. Letting out a foul breath, Carlos the horse grabbed a wine bottle on the table and took a sip. "Really, let me, the parent, worry less." Looking at the backs of the crowd, although Carlos Ma was complaining, the smile on his face obviously betrayed him. Go to his counsel. Looking at the complaint in his hand, Ma Karloff smiled disdainfully, and the paper in his hand suddenly burned. Luo Zhen rested his chin on his right hand and couldn't help laughing as he watched the horseman Carlos operate. "President, this is the receipt for this entrustment, and I leave it to you." Immediately, Luo Zhen handed over the receipt of his entrustment, this time to Mrs. Carlo, stretched and was about to leave. "Where are you going?" Seeing that Luo Zhen was about to leave again, the groom immediately shouted at Luo Zhen's back. "I haven't been back for so long. Go home and have a look." Luo Zhen didn't look back, stretched out his arms, and waved at the horseman behind him. Zeus and Prometheus floated on both sides of Luo Zhen's head, and their backs could not be seen for a while. Looking at the entrusted receipt in his hand, Ma Karloff smiled and put it away, because Erza also went out to make a commission and has not returned yet. Luo Zhen couldn't find anything to eat at home, so he simply went back to the guild. Although night fell, the guild at this time was still very lively. Luo Zhen found a seat and sat down, looking at Kana, who was holding a barrel and drinking. "Luo Zhen, has no one told you that it's impolite to keep staring at girls?" Being stared at by Luo Zhen like this, Kana suddenly felt uncomfortable and turned her head to Luo Zhen in displeasure and said, "Ha, it's been a long time since I saw you drinking, and suddenly I fell in love with it." Luo Zhen scratched his head and laughed, took a bottle of wine from the bar, and returned to the chair. Holding the wine bottle and waving at Kana, Kana pouted and raised the barrel at Luo Zhen. "Cool." After taking a sip of wine, Luo Zhen exhaled heavily and couldn't help shouting. After eating a full meal in the guild, Luo Zhen walked home slowly in flip-flops. It is worth mentioning that after Luo Zhen became an S-class wizard, he could accept more commissions, and the amount also increased a lot. Soon I had a house of my own in Magnolia. The area of the house is quite large, and it is not far from the guild, which made Luo Zhen and Erza quite satisfied. Tonight, Luo Zhen lay in bed very early and fell asleep. At home, Luo Zhen specially prepared a room for Prometheus and Zeus Napoleon. Although they don't need to sleep, Luo Zhen never treats them like slaves. On this day, Luo Zhen sat drinking in the guild as usual. Suddenly, the door of the guild was kicked open. A pink-haired boy rushed into the guild yelling, "Master, I'm back." And me. Along with his voice, everyone in the guild joked, "Natsu and Happy are back. Welcome home." "Natsu, told you many times, don't kick the door." Looking at the dilapidated gate, Ma Karloff yelled at the pink-haired boy who walked in. I know, old man." Natsu grinned and didn't listen to Mr. Carlo's words at all. "Hey, who are you?" "Newcomer." At this time, Natsu suddenly saw Luo Zhen, who was sitting in front of him yawning, and curiously approached Luo Zhen and asked. The people around were about to speak, but Luo Zhen raised his hand to stop them. Luo Zhen showed a harmless smile and said with a smile, "Are you Natsu? I've heard of your name a long time ago." Hearing his name from Luo Zhen's mouth, Natsu burst out laughing proudly. "Ha ha! Has the reputation of my uncle spread?" Looking at the proud and complacent Natsu, the surrounding members all looked at Natsu with the eyes of a fool. Chapter 21. Natsu was killed by one punch. Ha ha ha. Has my reputation spread everywhere? Not noticing the eyes of the guild members at all, Natsu looked up to the sky and laughed triumphantly. Luo Zhen smiled and was about to shake the fool in front of him again. Suddenly, there was a sound of heavy footsteps at the door. Everyone followed the footsteps and saw a figure in armor walking in slowly at the door, carrying a huge package. Erza dropped the package on the ground with a bang. "What are you all making noise about?" Throwing the package on the ground, Erza glanced at everyone one by one with sharp eyes. Suddenly his eyes fell on a familiar figure, and he didn't bother to reprimand the people around him. Quickly trotted to the front of this figure. Seeing that familiar face, Erza's eye sockets turned rosy. "When did you come back?" Looking at Erza, who has grown up a lot in front of him, Luo Zhen grinned and said, "Just a few days after I came back, I heard from the president that you were going to do a commission, and there was no one at home, so I sat in the guild for a while when I had nothing to do." "Sit, then let's go home." With red eyes, Erza reached out and put his hand on the back of Luo Zhen's. "Wait, you two know each other?" Natsu on the side suddenly made a sound, interrupting the reminiscence between the two. In Erza's dangerous eyes, he pointed to Luo Zhen and said, "Isn't this guy a newcomer who just joined the guild? How did you know each other?" Seeing the somewhat intimate behavior of the two, Natsu was completely puzzled. "You are stupid. Luo Zhen is an S-rank mage of our guild." Erza rolled his eyes, glared at Natsu, pulled Luo Zhen, and was about to leave. "Luo Zhen? Are you the powerful brat that uncle said?" Hearing Luo Zhen's name, Natsu's eyes lit up immediately. He quickly blocked their way and looked at them excitedly. "Come and fight me, Luo Zhen. I will defeat you and become the strongest." Natsu's eyes burst out with fighting intent, and he stared at Luo Zhen excitedly and shouted. Erza walked up to Luo Zhen, glared at Natsu, and said, "Don't be kidding, Natsu. How could you be Luo Zhen's opponent? How is it impossible? I will definitely become the strongest in the guild." Natsu yelled, excitedly about to fight Luo Zhen. Looking at the excited Natsu, the corners of Luo Zhen's mouth curled up slightly. He took Erza's arm and pulled him aside. "Erza, a man's serious duel can't be disappointing." Seeing Luo Zhen's slightly playful expression, Erza could not help but walk aside while holding his forehead. "Come on, Natsu, let me see you." Standing where he was, Luo Zhen hooked his fingers at Natsu. "Coming." Natsu shouted loudly and rushed straight to Luo Zhen. Boom! With a loud noise, Natsu's body instantly fell to the ground straight. There was a big lump on his head, and he was knocked out by Luo Zhen's punch. Natsu. Behind Natsu, Happy with folded arms, was still watching the show. Seeing Natsu being knocked down in an instant, he made a surprise sound. Fly to Natsu's side and turn Natsu over. Seeing this, Natsu was punched and rolled his eyes, and the whole person lost consciousness directly. "It's too strong." A little scared, he raised his head to look at Luo Zhen, and then looked at Natsu on the ground with worried eyes. "It's okay, I just fainted. I didn't use all my strength." Looking at the worried Happy, Luo Zhen knelt down and rubbed Blue's kitten's head. "What? Luo Zhen hasn't used his full strength yet?" Happy was very surprised. He didn't expect that the strength gap between Luo Zhen and Natsu was so big. Luo Zhen showed a smile at the corner of his mouth, looked at the shocked Happy, and said with a smile, "Yes, it probably took less than 1/10 of the strength. You are a monster." The small body took 2 steps back, and the originally awe-inspiring eyes instantly turned into horror. "Take good care, Natsu. I'll go back first." But, little Happy, pulling Erza's white and tender palm, Luo Zhen waved to Happy, who was still pushing Natsu's body. It wasn't until Luo Zhen's figure left the guild that everyone returned to Natsu's side. "It's a pain in the now. I didn't expect that Luo Zhen would have such a naughty time, but Luo Zhen has become stronger again. Didn't he only use 1/10 of the strength just now? I feel like that punch could blow my head apart. The members of the guild surrounded him, but no one cared about Natsu, who fell to the ground. Since Luo Zhen said that he just passed out, it means there must be nothing wrong. Walking on the road, Luo Zhen looked at Erza carrying such a huge package and couldn't help but have black lines all over his head. Erza, what the hell is in your package? Originally, Luo Zhen wanted to help, but was rejected by Erza. Luo Zhen helplessly looked at the package that was bigger than a person and asked, "Just some clothes and weapons?" Erza puffed up his chest, looked at the huge package behind him, and said with a smile, Hey, you're here for a commission, not a trip." With black lines all over Luo Zhen's face, he couldn't help complaining to Erza. "But it's full of necessities." Erza turned his head away, completely unaware that there was anything wrong with him. Seeing the innocent expression on Erza's face, Luo Zhen helplessly spread his hands and said, "Okay, just be happy." Back home, Luo Zhen stretched lazily. "Master, you are back." As soon as Luo Zhen returned home, Zeus and Prometheus flew over. "Well, let's go play." Waving at them, Luo Zhen took down Erza's huge package. "Did you have meal?" After returning home, Erza changed the armor on his body and wore a white dress on his body. Without sitting down to rest for a while, Erza walked into the kitchen and got busy. Looking at Erza's busy back, Luo Zhen felt like a family of two. Time to eat. Soon, Erza finished the meal, stood in front of the dining table, and shouted to Luo Zhen. Luo Zhen trotted to the kitchen, washed his hands, and went to the dining room. "It's so fragrant. Just smelling it will make you full." Luo Zhen grinned and said with a thumbs up to Erza. Gazing at Luo Zhen, Erza said softly, "Hurry up and eat." Chapter 22 Discipline Committee. Erza, I will be the examiner. After eating and drinking enough, Luo Zhen sat lazily on the sofa, and Zeus squeezed beside Luo Zhen, allowing Luo Zhen to lean on him comfortably. Erza cleaned the dishes and came to the living room, wiping his hands. Looking at Luo Zhen, who was slumped on the sofa, Erza couldn't help saying to Luo Zhen, "You can't lie down just after eating. Get up and go for a walk." Looking at Erza, who already looked like a disciplinary committee member in the original book, Luo Zhen waved his hand and said, "I don't want to move anymore." Erza put his hands on his hips and stared straight at Luo Zhen. All right. Being stared at by Erza without saying a word, Luo Zhen was finally defeated and got up helplessly to follow behind Luo Zhen. As the sun set, Erza and Luo Zhen walked side by side on the street. The orange sunset sprinkled on the two of them, stretching their shadows extremely long and narrow. Luo Zhen, when are you going to leave this time? Walking on the road, Erza put his hands behind his back and looked down at the ground. Luo Zhen's arm was hanging on Erza's shoulder, and he replied with a smile. "This time, it should not be so fast. The president said he had something to do with me, but he forgot to ask him what's the matter." With a blush on his face, Erza raised his head and gave Luo Zhen a white look. "The president should have something important to ask you. Don't you need to ask?" "Forget it. The old man would have come to me long ago if he had something important to do." Luo Zhen rolled his eyes, shrugged, and said. Hearing Luo Zhen's words, Erza also nodded. "Makes sense." As the sun went down, the two went home after a long walk in Magnolia. Because Erza just came back today, he went back to his room early to sleep. The next day, Luo really slept comfortably. After waking up, Luo Zhen stretched and let out a strange moan. Walk out of the room. Erza is not at home. After washing up, Luo Zhen also walked towards the guild. As soon as he entered the guild, Luo Zhen immediately heard the noisy voices of Gray and Natsu. "Yo, are you two in such good spirits?" Luo Zhen grinned and greeted the two with their heads on their heads. It's Luo Zhen. Good morning." Hearing the voice, Gray looked over and said with a smile on his face, "Why did you undress to say hello?" Luo Zhen's complexion turned dark, and he complained as he looked at Gray, who was stripped down to only his underwear. When? You perverted underwear man. Stop rambling, fire-breathing BD. What did you say, you naked man? Who are you calling a naked man, BD? The two quarreled again without saying a word. Luo Zhen found a seat and sat down, watching the two fight each other with one punch and one kick. Luo Zhen, come here for a moment. At this moment, the groom Carlo, who was already a little drunk sitting on the bar, yelled at Luo Zhen. Luo Zhen raised his head, looked at Mr. Carlo the horse, stood up, and walked towards the bar. President, what's wrong? Carelessly, he sat down next to the horse Carlo and took a bottle of wine from the bar. Don't always drink wine from the guild, BD. Well, President, don't be so stingy. Luo Zhen took a sip of his wine with a smile and put an arm around Carlo's shoulder. What do you think of this year's S-Class Mage assessment? The two sat side by side, watching Gray and Natsu fight not far away, and Carlo suddenly asked Luo Zhen. Luo Zhen turned his head in surprise and asked Carlos the horse, "What?" It's time for this year's assessment again. With black lines all over his face, Ma Carlos yelled at Luo Zhen. Have you ever paid attention to the things in the guild? Everyone's eyes were attracted by the movement of Carlos the horse and Luo Zhen. Ma Karloff waved his hand, then asked Luo Zhen with a serious expression, "You will be the examiner for this year's assessment." Me, President? Are you kidding me? Luo Zhen was surprised and pointed at himself with his finger. Now you're the only S-Mage in the guild who is still a Magnolia. If you don't serve as the examiner, I will go. Ma Carlos stared, stood up, and stood on the bar, barely touching Luo Zhen's shoulder. Patting Luo Zhen on the shoulder, he said in a deep tone, "Young people, the greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. President, are you not afraid that I will release water to Erza?" Luo Zhen didn't refuse either, and it happened that he didn't plan to go out to make commissions during this time. So he said to Mrs. Ma Carlo with a meaningful smile, "You're not that kind of person, and Erza won't accept it." Ma Karloff didn't care about this matter at all, and said with a smile on his face, "Okay, I accept," seeing that he seemed to have been manipulated by the horseman Carlos. Luo Zhen shrugged helplessly. Because the assessment day for the S-level mages is approaching, most of the members of the guild have returned. All members gather in the guild except Gildart's and Lajerth's and Thor's congregation. Soon, the day of the S-Class Mages assessment will arrive. Luo Zhen sat beside the horseman Carlo, looking at the people in the guild with a smile. This year's S-Rank Mage assessment has officially started. Following Carlos Ma's announcement, everyone turned their attention to the three standing in front. Erza, Mirajane, and Kana. Last year's S-level assessment was the three of them. I didn't expect it to be them again this year. I hope someone can pass this year, and Fairy Tail can add another S-Class Mage. Erza, come on. Kana, beat them up, come on. Sister Mira, you're the best, come on. Everyone in the field cheered and cheered for the three of them. Luo Zhen, I'll leave it to you. Ma Karloff set his eyes on the smiling Luo Zhen. Nodding his head, Luo Zhen put away his lazy look, straightened up, and looked at the three of them with a smile on his face. "Hello, I'm the examiner for this S-Class Mage assessment." Luo Zhen grinned, with a smile in his eyes. Sure enough, the examiner is Luo Zhen. Luo Zhen won't put water on Erza, will he? What nonsense are you talking about? Are you doubting the personality of Luo Zhen and Erza? You take these three maps. Luo Zhen waved his right hand, and three maps appeared in front of the three of them. After the three got their respective maps, Luo Zhen said with a grin, "Then now I will announce the content of this assessment." Chapter 23, the assessment begins. Get ready for a show. You all have a map in your hand, and each has a destination on it. Your assessment is to go to the destination, get back the things I put there, and come to me at the location on the opposite side of the map. By the way, if you can meet each other on the road, you can snatch each other's items. If the items are lost, then it will be regarded as a failure of the assessment. See you next year. Luo Zhen stood up and said to the three girls standing in front of him. The three of them looked at the map in their hands, and their destinations were not very far from Magnolia. Then, the assessment begins now. Because the content of this assessment was determined by Luo Zhen, Luo Zhen did not ask them to find their own partners, but let them complete it alone. As Luo Zhen announced the start of the assessment, The three of them looked at each other, and Mira Jane rushed out of the guild first. Yiki Juechen disappeared from everyone's sight. Erza and Kana looked at each other warily as Mira Jane disappeared. Soon, he chased Mira Jane's back and rushed out of the guild. Sitting on the chair, Luo Zhen yawned and continued to lean back lazily. Looking at the lazy Luo Zhen, the horseman's head was suddenly covered with black lines. "Hey, brat, don't you plan to set off to see your destination?" They came back so soon, Luo Zhen waved his hand, not paying attention to this assessment at all. "You didn't arrange Zeus and the others at their destination, did you?" Suddenly thought of something, Ma Karloff asked Luo Zhen. Luo Zhen grinned and said, "Otherwise, wouldn't their assessment be too easy? Although Zeus and the others are good in strength, there is still a gap compared to their strength. As long as they can get the items that Zeus and the others protect, Zeus and the others will stop attacking." Carlos Ma nodded and didn't ask too much. Last year's S-Class Mage assessment was conducted by Legerses, but none of them passed the assessment. In the words of Legerses, what qualifications do these ways have to become S-Class Mages? But Ma Karloff knew that the strength of Erza and Mira Jane was completely enough. After a while, the members of the guild sat down and discussed who would win this assessment. At this time, Luo Zhen suddenly stood up and stretched. Finally, someone arrived. Luo Zhen muttered to himself, then walked out of the guild with his hands in his pockets. Looking at Luo Zhen's back, everyone suddenly became excited. Is it finally about to start? The final assessment. I'm looking forward to it. Damn it. Why don't we go and see? At this time, Natsu suddenly proposed to Gray, who was beside him. A little hesitation flashed in Gray's eyes. He looked at the drowsy groom Carlo on the bar, couldn't bear the anticipation in his heart, nodded heavily and said, "Okay, let's go." The three of Natsu, Gray, and Happy looked at the groom Carlo quietly and then slipped out of the guild. Follow behind the slow Luo Zhen. Luo Zhen walked slowly towards Magnolia's cathedral. It seemed that they had noticed the Gray three behind them. Stopping suddenly, Luo Zhen turned his head with a smile on his face. "You three, what do you want to do by secretly following?" Knowing that they were discovered, Gray and the others simply stopped hiding and jumped out of the alley. "Luo Zhen, we want to see Erza fight. Take me there. Take me there." Looking at the sincere eyes of the three of them, Luo Zhen refused without hesitation. "No. Damn it. Luo Zhen, I must go and see it." After being rejected, Natsu shouted loudly. His legs suddenly condensed into flames and wanted to rush straight past Luo Zhen. Boom! The moment Natsu's figure rushed past Luo Zhen, with a loud noise, Natsu's body suddenly fell to the ground straight. His body was twitching slightly, and a big lump bulged on his head. Another instant kill!" Happy exclaimed, flapping its wings and coming to Natsu's side, pushing Natsu's body. "Gray, do you want to come too?" With a smile on his face, Luo Zhen looked at Gray and asked with a smile. "I do not want." Without the slightest hesitation, Gray shook his head decisively. Nodding in satisfaction, Luo Zhen pointed to Natsu, who had passed out beside him, and said, "Then you take this idiot back." "No problem, leave it to me." Gray patted his chest, came to Luo Zhen's side, and helped Natsu to leave. After seeing the three of them off, Luo Zhen turned his head and continued walking towards Magnolia's cathedral. It didn't take long to come to the door of the church. The surroundings of the church were extremely quiet, and Luo Zhen sat alone on the steps of the church, waiting for their arrival. "Owner." At this time, the figure of Zeus floated gently behind Luo Zhen and shouted to Luo Zhen in a low voice. Luo Zhen replied in a flat voice without raising his head. "Sorry, master. I didn't stop Mira Jane from taking things." Zeus's voice was a little sluggish, and he felt ashamed of Luo Zhen. Luo Zhen smiled, turned around, and pulled Zeus's body to his side, propping up his arms. He smiled and said, "Then did you lose to her?" Zeus shook his head decisively. Although he failed to hold the thing, Mira Jane couldn't defeat Zeus either. "That's fine. I plan to give things to the three of them." Luo Zhen smiled indifferently and leaned lazily on Zeus's body. Not long after, Napoleon also appeared. Seeing Napoleon's figure, Luo Zhen was not surprised at all. Although Prometheus was a bit late, he appeared not long after Napoleon appeared. Now, I'm here waiting for the arrival of the three of them. Suddenly, an explosion sounded in the distance. Luo Zhen's domineering aura was activated, and he sensed that there were already two people fighting over there. The show begins. Luo Zhen grinned, sat on Zeus's body, and said, "Come on, let's go to the theater." Zeus rushed to the sky and galloped in the direction Luo Zhen pointed. On the ground, Erza was dressed in silver and white armor and held two swords. The person opposite is Mira Jane. At this moment, Mira Jane was covered with demonic energy, floating in mid-air with a pair of bat-like wings waving. "Erza, hand over your things." Mira Jane squinted and yelled at Erza, "Come and get it if you have the ability." With a sneer, Erza completely ignored Mira Jane, raised the long sword in his right hand high, and pointed the sword point at Mira Jane. Chapter 24: The battle between the two women. Kana abstained. Sitting cross-legged on top of Zeus, Luo Zhen took out a bunch of snacks out of nowhere and watched Erza and Mira Jane fighting below happily. Seeing this scene, Prometheus and Napoleon, who were floating behind, were immediately covered in black lines, unable to understand Luo Zhen's behavior. The battle below also became intense, and Mira Jane, who was originally at odds with Erza, exerted her full strength. The dark magic ball continuously bombarded Erza, making the ground pitted. Suddenly, Luo Zhen came to his senses and asked Prometheus and the others behind him, "I can't be blamed for the destruction where they fought, right?" Looking at Napoleon, Prometheus wanted to shake his head. Seeing their faces covered in black lines, Luo Zhen turned his head helplessly and then looked at the battle below. Suddenly, the corners of Luo Zhen's mouth curled up slightly, watching Erza not far from the two fighting. "Hey, found a little mouse." I saw Kana poking his head out of the alley with a small head, looking helplessly at Erza and Mira Jane who were fighting ahead. Really, why did I meet such a monster-like opponent? Kana was helpless and sat on the ground against the wall. Tian Luan, dazzling sword. The sword rain surrounded Erza's back, and as the countless sword rain swept away, Mira Jane in the sky flapped its wings and kept dodging attacks. "Is this the only level? It's hard for you to hit me like this." Erza, Mira Jane in the sky, took it easy, while still irritating Erza with constant trash talking. Snort. With a cold snort, Erza held two swords in front of him. Tianluan, the three swords. The twin swords in his hands attacked at high speed, and a triangular slash went straight to Mira Jane. Changed to Kuroba armor. Just as Mira Jane was dodging, a magic circle flashed under Erza's feet, directly enveloped Erza's body in it. As Tianluan's armor dissipated, a touch of Black's armor appeared on Erza's body. With a shake of the wings behind him, Erza soared into the sky, and with a long sword in his hand, he went straight to Mira Jane's face. "You underestimate me too much." Erza appeared in front of Mira Jane in an instant, with a long sword directly attacking the door. A sneer flashed across Mira Jane's face. Black's magical power is condensed in the palm of his right hand. The moment Erza's long sword was about to hit, the movement stopped instantly. I saw Mira Jane raised her right hand and stopped in front of Erza, and Erza held his long sword on Mira Jane's neck. At this moment, neither of them dared to act rashly. In the alley far away, Kana gritted her teeth and watched Erza and Mira Jane fighting in the sky. Finally, he sighed deeply. "Go out of the alley and rush straight to the direction of the church." Both Erza and Mira Jane in the sky noticed Kana's figure, and after looking at each other, they backed away in unison. "Let go of you, stupid woman, for once." Mira Jane snorted coldly, and then the wings behind her trembled, and she swooped down directly towards Kana, who was running on the ground. I didn't say it was over. Watching Mira Jane's swooping figure, Erza naturally knew what she wanted to do, leaving no chance. He rushed straight down, chasing Mira Jane's back. Erza soon caught up to Mira Jane, and the two fought again. Luo Zhen, who was watching the play above, couldn't help feeling a little disappointed when he saw Kana rushing towards the church. Well, Sighing, Luo Zhen had no choice but to pat Zeus's body and let Zeus fly in the direction of the church. Back at the door of the church, Luo Zhen sat on the stairs, waiting for Kana's arrival. Not long after, Kana's figure appeared in Luo Zhen's sight. Kana also saw Luo Zhen from afar. "Kana, why are you here?" Luo Zhen put one hand on Zeus's body, frowning, and asked Kana. I am not their opponent." There was a wry smile on Kana's face. Watching the thrilling battle just now, Kana's heart felt trembling for a while. How can I be the opponent of those two monsters? It will definitely be killed in seconds. A look of disappointment flashed in Luo Zhen's eyes. He looked at Kana calmly and said, "You know, Kana, only one person can win the assessment of an S-level mage, since you don't want to fight them, and you still appear in front of me. Then you can only fight me." As he spoke, Luo Zhen hooked his fingers at Kana, letting Kana make the first move. The expression on Kana's face froze. He gritted his teeth, took out a small kit from his pocket, and threw it on the ground. With a bitter smile on his face, he said, "Luo Zhen, I abstain." The kit was exactly what Luo Zhen asked Prometheus to guard. Luo Zhen nodded and waved to Prometheus, asking him to bring the items. Prometheus was floating in the air, and when he came to Kana, his eyes were full of contempt and disdain. Prometheus felt more aggrieved. How could she let her take things away in her own hands? Taking the things back to the side at home, Luo Zhen opened the kit. Inside was a small note with nothing on it. Throwing the note on Prometheus, the note instantly turned into ashes. "Then, Kana, you have failed the assessment. You can go back to the guild." With an incomparably calm expression, Luo Zhen said while looking at Kana, who was in a daze. After a long silence, Kana squeezed out a smile, bowed slightly to Luo Zhen, and then ran away from here. Shaking his head, Luo Zhen didn't expect Kana to be so afraid of Erza and Mira Jane. Since he was able to participate in the S-level mage assessment, then Kana's strength must not be weak. But things have happened, and there is no regret medicine to take. Luo Zhen continued to observe the fight between Erza and Mira Jane amidst his knowledge and arrogance. Just a short while after he left, the battle between the two had already become anxious. Both of them suffered some injuries, but their momentum was even more high-spirited. Wearing Kuroba armor, Erza soared in the sky with wings flapping, holding a long sword and colliding with Mira Jane again and again. Mira Jane received the soul of Satan and was not afraid of Erza's attack. Chapter 25, Final Assessment. Stubborn Second Daughter. Seeing the desperate fighting style of the two, Luo Zhen couldn't help frowning slightly. Patting Zeus beside him, Luo Zhen said, "Zeus, go and stop them. Bring them here." Hearing Luo Zhen's order, Zeus soared in the sky and rushed straight to the place where Erza and others were fighting. Soon, due to Zeus's intervention, the two stopped fighting after talking a few trash words to each other. The two waved their wings at the same time, galloping towards the church. Boom! Erza's body fell heavily to the ground, stood up, and looked at Luo Zhen, who was sitting on the stairs, and asked, "Why stop us?" Mira Jane followed closely behind, staring straight at Luo Zhen, and said with a sneer, "Aren't you going to put water on this dull woman? What are you talking about? You spiritual little sister? I will not accept such an assessment. I will defeat you head-on and become an S-class mage in a fair way. It's hard to say who beats who, you flat woman." The two were natural rivals like Gray and Natsu, and they began to confront each other without saying a word. Luo Zhen held his forehead helplessly and shouted with black lines all over his head, "Stop it!" A domineering arrogance suddenly erupted from Luo Zhen's body, pressing directly on the two of them. The domineering color that combines Whitebeard and Big Mom is so powerful that it is difficult for the two of them to move in an instant. Seeing the two of them stop, Luo Zhen regained his domineering look. Kneeling down on the ground out of breath, there was a dignified look in the eyes of the two of them. This breath is so strong. When your battle is over, you don't know how long it will last, so I decided to change the content of the assessment. Luo Zhen spread his hands, pointed to a large mountain not far away, and said, "Follow me there." After saying that, Luo Zhen jumped on Zeus's back and rushed towards the mountain. The two looked at each other and followed without giving in. Soon, Luo Zhen fell into the mountains, where there was a huge open space. After Feng Fan and Erza followed, Luo Zhen said to them with a smile on his face, "This is the venue for the final assessment. Are you ready? Bring it on." "It's already ready." Mira Jane and Erza agreed one after another, waiting nervously. "That's fine. Then the final assessment is if someone can still stand under my attack. That is an S-rank wizard. Let's say at first, people will die. If you want to quit, you can only do it now." Luo Zhen spoke terrifying words with that smiling smile. "Who wants to quit? Come on, Luo Zhen." The two looked at each other. How could the two who were facing each other give up and quit in front of their opponents? "That's fine. I'll only strike once. And those who can still stand up are S-rank wizards. If both of you can stand, I can apply to the president and let your colleagues be promoted." As he said, a white mask formed on Luo Zhen's fists. "Change. Armor of Vajra." Seeing Luo Zhen's pose, although Erza had never seen it before, he put on the armor with the strongest defense in advance. And Mira Jane is still in the form of Satan, ready to meet the attack. Coming. Seeing that the two of them were fully prepared, Luo Zhen didn't hold back either. Cross your arms across your chest and squat down slightly. His fists slammed down towards the void around him. The next moment, a crackling sound rang in the ears of the two of them. Following the sound, I saw Luo Zhen's side. That fist seemed to completely shatter the void. As the space was shattered, a violent vibration also rushed in. The two held on, not to be engulfed by this turbulent force. Mountains collapsed and the ground crumbled. At this moment, as if the end of the world had arrived, this huge mountain immediately collapsed, and rubble continued to roll down from the mountain. The bodies of Erza and Mira Jane were also sent flying by this violent impact. And
no more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.